Our regular Albany County Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting, May 10th, 2023. Just a preamble, I am chairing the meeting because our chairman said eye surgery today. It's my first time, so bear with me. We're here, Albany County Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm counting on our staff here to keep me in line and make sure we follow good procedure. Don't hesitate to speak up. That needs to be current. With that said, I'll call the roll. Ms. Hanning? Here. McCormick? Here. Chairman Hinckley is absent. David? Here. I am here. First item is approval of agenda. We have three different, approval of agenda. Are there any additions or deletions or corrections today? No one? David? Nope. In that case, it's our motion to approve the agenda. I second. Okay, any further discussion? In that case, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. I will move on to approval of minutes, and we have three different sets of minutes to approve. And the first is from our meeting, April 12th, 2023, that's our regular meeting. Are there any corrections or additions to those minutes?
I have a question.
Yeah.
It seems like some of the comments during our discussions are detailed and some because the discussion occurred. Is there a rule or guideline when we give more detail and when we less?
I do it typically when motions are made, they're more detailed, and then when there's no motion made, I don't. So
Okay,
I guess that's kind of what I go by.
okay, just wondering.
Oh, I do have one correction to make note. On page 3 of the minutes, in paragraph 4. Like to make 2 additions of words. I would make the sentence read, he also said that and add 4 in front of people's. FOR.
That 4 people,
No, FOR.
okay,
And then people who are consulting purchasing land are considering a use switch that and add the words if they think they don't need to do their homework. So the whole sentence would read, he also said that for people who are considering purchasing land, and considering the use switch. That if they think they don't need to do their homework, they're wrong.
got it.
Any further discussion? I have a motion to approve the amended.
I make a motion to accept the minutes.
So a second,
A second.
all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Move on to the minutes for April 19th, 2023, which is our training meeting. Discussion of other things are vision none. And so our motion accept those minutes.
I second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No, motion carries. And our final set of meetings was for the meeting on April 26th, 2023. Any additions or corrections or deletions there? In that case, it's our motion to accept those minutes.
Mr. Chair, I move we accept the minutes from the special meeting on April 19th, 2023.
This is for April 26th.
Oh, April 26th, sorry. Oh, it's a duplication of the packet.
Yeah, yes, that might be a correction.
Okay, that's this. I move to approve the meetings for the minutes for the special meeting on April 26th, 2020.
I second.
Any further discussion? No. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And it's for the minutes. We're going to disclosures and conflicts of interest. From David.
Yeah, so I have been invited by Mrs. and Dr. Starkey to the place to talk about the aquifer, or basically their perspective, and explain more about their claims about the aquifer. And I, based on recommendations from Mr. Ayers, I suggested that they would come and present it to all of us. that should we meet in person, it'll be my responsibility to record all this. And that I'm worried that I may misrepresent the claims, so I notified them that I would much prefer if they did it to all of us, explain it to all of us. That's one. The second is, given the comments that we had on the 26th, that some of the data from the WANC 2019 report may be invalid. I asked my colleague and retired hydrology professor from the University of Wyoming, Dr. Scott Miller, if he wouldn't mind to take a look at both the report itself and the criticism. He gladly agreed, and Mr. Gertz sent him the documents. That's my report.
Mr. McCormick,
Haven't had any conversations.
Sam,
I had a conversation with the homeowners where the septic tank leach field study was performed. And I reported the contents of that in my review of the start account.
and I have not. Okay, then moving on. We have no public applications, and next item on our agenda is the planning, zoning, rules of practice and procedure, public hearing and action. You want to do something?
So, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, as you're aware, we've undertaken the task of rewriting or updating, I should say, our rules of practice and procedure from the 1980s or 70s document that we were using. I know Commissioner Hanning was very involved with that, as well as Matt Ayers, our county attorney representative. And so what we've done is we've published that draft for the requirements. I mean, the Laramie Boomerang, and they're here for a public hearing. So we can take public hearing comments on those rules of procedure. And then it's up to you if you'd like to make a decision on those this time. And if you have questions for myself or Mr. Ayers, I'm gonna be happy to answer questions.
Do you have any questions? Start with the name. All right.
It's pretty exciting stuff.
We went over it thoroughly and it's.
Bylaws are all. But important.
Yeah, I have no comments. We'll try to find it in the packet. What page it starts on?
It starts on page 636.
Well, I got it. Okay, thank you.
Well, in that case, we will open the public hearing. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on our updated rules of practice and procedure of Albany County Planning and Zoning Commission? So indicate that yes, please step forward and state your name and where you're from.
My name is Mary Clark. I'm a resident, also Laramie proper, as well as Rainbow Valley up in Centennial. We are wondering regarding Centennial, what's the policy for short-term rentals? We're getting more and more of those. And in the winter, it's becoming very difficult for two reasons. One, snowmobilers pull their trailers through, causing snow drifts. It's a very different climate up there than here. Also, the people who are renting out don't prepare the renters what the conditions
Okay,
are.
let's not.
Okay, sure.
This is for the rules and procedures. The
Oh, I'm
planning
sorry.
commission. That's
I'm-
okay. And towards the end of the meeting,
Oh.
although it's going to be probably a long meeting, we have possibly there for the public to make any kind of comment.
Okay, all right.
But that's fine.
This never happened. You sound great. Go ahead.
That's not gonna be up and everything.
Is there anyone else who might like to make a public comment about this? Is there anyone online? I don't see anyone online at all. Going once, going twice. In that case, may I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I approve the close the public hearing.
Second. Okay. In that case, all those in favor say aye.
I,
Any opposed? Motion carries. In that case, we'll move to commissioner discussion. Is there any discussion, Commissioner? What's your pleasure?
Discussion, but I'll move to approve the rules of practice and procedure of the Albany County Planning and Zoning Commission.
Is there a second? Any further discussion on that motion? In that case, we'll vote by roll call. Ms. Henning,
Aye.
Mr. David. Aye. Mr. Warnick.
Aye.
I vote aye. And motion carries, it's unanimous. Our next item is the book area management plan, public hearing action. And David, once again, it's up to you.
Growth plan, is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Just wanted to go through a little bit of a timeline of where we've been, where we're at. And then Melissa Ruth from Logan Simpson is also here, and she'll provide you some additional information, maybe answer some questions that are out there. So an intergovernmental committee was formed by the Board of County Commissioners and the Laramie City Council to address growth of the city of Laramie out into the rural areas of the county. The direction of this committee approved or was to by the city council. The direction of the committee approved by the City Council and Board of County Commissioners was to work collaboratively to define a growth area in the rural urban interface, create a policy recommendation in this area, and provide recommended regulatory implementation strategies and the draft city county growth area management agreement. So this group that was formed, this committee, they went through an RFP process, and we hired Logan Simpson to assist with this project. A contract was signed in February of 2022. And the scope of the project included in the RFP included a review and consider modifications of the city and county comprehensive plans, establish growth boundaries, provide policy recommendations for development within the defined growth area, review of existing regulations, statutory authority and procedures, and provide recommendations for changes to the regulations, and to develop a city county growth area management agreement for future consideration. And then the project was broken into basically 4 phases, each phase building on the last. The first was phase 1 was the collection of existing information, gathering data and information that we needed to, and we provided that to Logan Simpson to analyze. There was a field visit to important properties around the city to identify challenges and opportunities for future growth. We also were involved with over 40 in-person interviews with community stakeholders, which included major landowners, contractors, realtors, etc. And then there was 2 online questionnaires collected. We collected more than 200 responses from those. The growth area options were drafted, or joint growth area options were drafted during phase 2, which included the technical analysis of important data, population projections, utility and fiscal analysis, and land use constraints. 3 growth scenarios were created and presented at a series of public events, including the downtown farmers market, the county farmers market, which was kind of only held last year at the fairgrounds. I think they're doing one of those this year, but they had about 4 or 5 of those events. But we did it there. Freedom has a birthday, Laramie Jubilee Days, and County Fair Family Night, which is also a county fair night, or county farmers market night. And then there was also some online questionnaires presenting the 3 growth scenarios, and that which gathered around 50 responses. Phases 3 and 4 are they're kind of being completed, and there's some things that we're still working on. And they include the development of standards, a review process, joint growth area, intergovernmental agreement. And again, these things are kind of ongoing as we wait for the cap to be approved. Once the cap's approved, then we'll get regulations for your review and possible implementation, as well as an agreement as per the RFP. And just recently we've had some joint work sessions, as you know, with Planning Commission, as well as there were some open houses that we held. And yeah, we've tried to include the public as much as possible in this process. And so I guess at this point, I'll let or ask Melissa if she'll come up and kind of review anything that I haven't and provide some information. And then if you have some questions, we'll both be available to answer those.
Thanks, Dave. All right, good evening, Chair and Commission. I wanted to highlight just a few points, underscore some things that David said, and then talk a little bit about the unique components of this plan. So in total, when we released the draft document, which is up on a platform called Conveo for folks to comment on, we received 432 views and a total of 7 comments. Looking back at the public engagement that we did throughout the process, the first round of public engagement, that first questionnaire that we put out, kind of asking folks of how they generally feel about growth in the area surrounding the city, but in the county, we garnered 189 total responses, 285 additional partial responses. So those were folks that clicked on the questionnaire, opened it, but didn't finish it, or only answered a couple questions. The second questionnaire, we got an additional 50 responses. And then, as Dave mentioned, we were at quite a few different in-person events where we spoke to hundreds, if not kind of thousands of folks. So we had mapping activities for folks, county staff, our staff, and city staff were all there kind of answering questions for folks. And then in phase 3, we went back to some of the folks that we interviewed in phase 1 and did some additional interviews digging into some development standards and looking at kind of refining the plan a little bit more. Looking at the unique components of this plan, so a growth plan or a plan kind of this caliber is not something that's really done in Wyoming yet. There is another example of a plan. It is the City of Sheridan County Joint Growth Area Plan. So that's kind of what we were using as a model for this document. This will be the first joint growth plan adopted jointly besides that document. There have been other plans that have been quasi-adopted jointly. So like Plan Cheyenne was a similar process, but the county and the city ended up adopting separate versions of the same document, which has caused some issues for them kind of down the line looking at having a joint document. This document, what's really important is that it builds upon the city and county comprehensive plans. So it is not a comprehensive plan in and of itself. Think of it as an addendum to both documents. So it's an addendum to the county comprehensive plan, an addendum to the city comprehensive plan. That's why it's important to adopt the same version of the document, if possible. The foundation for this document is the foundation for the intergovernmental agreement, as David mentioned, and the eventual zoning resolution updates for the county in order to implement the plan. So those are pieces coming after this plan, related process, similar process, and we've kind of tied them all together, but the plan comes first, the other things come later. The important piece of this plan is the land use map. So it covers, as you saw, kind of what we call the donut area around the city. Having a jointly adopted land use map for this area is important. It ensures consistency and interpretation and in land uses kind of looking forward. It's kind of the foundation of the plan itself. There is a utility analysis that was completed with this plan. It is a general high-level utility analysis. So it is not a parcel by parcel specific utility analysis. It does not specify things like specific pipe sizes or pressures that need to be accommodated in order to service the areas. It just generally looks at where does the county need to potentially look at some infrastructure improvements in order to accommodate things that we're showing in the plan or that are already existing in the county. And last but not least, the plan includes an existing conditions analysis that is fairly detailed. So that's that first section of the plan with all the framework maps. So we spent a lot of time with city and county staff, road and bridge, the engineers, development review, looking at kind of everything that's on the ground now, where things are at, what's working, what's not, and what the direction is. We also worked with the intergovernmental committee on understanding what sort of information they need in order to be able to utilize this plan more efficiently. So that's kind of all the information I had. Does anyone have questions on anything I just said, or I can stand for questions?
Melissa, I think what I would like to do is noting that the city representative might by city planning director Kenny. Are there any comments you'd like to make?
Mr. Chair, yes, I can make a few comments.
And perhaps you could also let us know where the city stands with right now.
Sure.
Adoption process.
So Philip Cavatuller, Principal Planner with the City of Laramie. And yeah, I don't want to echo too much of what Mr. Gertch and Ms. Ruth have gone over, but to answer your question first, Mr. Chair, is that the City Planning Commission did approve the resolution to recommend approval of the plan, that the City Council adopt the plan at their April 10th meeting. So where we stand right now is kind of working together with this commission and then the Board of Commissioners decision in trying to roll that out. But a lot's been said about the public input that the public input process that went into this planning effort. And I guess just to mention too that the 2 surveys, the public workshops that were very well attended for those of you who did come. All that information is in one of the appendices, which we felt was really important to kind of note all the public input that was received. So just to echo that part, also like to add that Wyoming state statute endorses this type of joint planning efforts. That is in the City Planning Commission resolution. I don't know if that is attached here, but that resolution, I'm glad to share that with Dave or with Mr. Gertch, and he can share it with you all, but it really, it's what we presented to the Planning Commission and speaks to, again, that public input that went into this. This was, I mean, we had public hearings on 5 occasions that were advertised in the newspaper as well as on our website. So this plan, the planning process was done in as transparent a manner as we knew how to do. And the plan itself is built on many of those comments that we received through the effort. So without, I think my colleagues on this planning effort really spoke to the plan well, but just to answer your question, where the city stands. And as you guys discuss, we're all here, so we're glad to answer any questions as well.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioners, questions you have? David?
So I voiced my numerous concerns about the plan already, and I hope people have looked at them and have some responses to them. They include limited planning on recreation, which is a topic in the plan, but really little is said about any planning in it. There is mismatches between the sewage system and the water lines that don't make sense in terms of disruption to people's life. I haven't seen any reference to how we're gonna handle the landfill, increased use of the landfill. I didn't see any reference to governance, changes in authorities, and the plan is basically where are we gonna put sewage and water lines, and even that is incomplete. So I have a lot of reservations about the plan as is, and until my concerns are addressed, I don't know that I can voice an opinion on it.
Bishop of the party.
I understand all that. My sense is that this isn't supposed to be comprehensive. It wasn't supposed to address everything. That we had the comprehensive county planning. So, I don't have much to say.
Well, it's like David has to that.
Yeah, let's see what David has to say.
Well, I mean, I guess I would just try to address some of Ms. and David's comments. This isn't a recreation plan. Those are typically done aside and as an individual plan. The city of Laramie has a recreation master plan, which I believe covers some of the areas that we're looking at. And maybe the city of Laramie can answer that a little bit better, but yeah, it didn't address recreation. That wasn't in the scope of what was provided from the intergovernmental agreement or intergovernmental committee folks. The sewage system and water mismatch, I guess maybe Melissa can answer that. I'm not sure where the mismatch is, or is it just the lines are not?
Pouring water lines into Sherman Hill Estates.
Okay.
But no sewage. And this is the main concern for the cap. Doesn't make any sense.
Sure, okay. Yeah, I mean. I don't know if you have anything to say about that, Melissa. Yeah. I'll address the government authority stuff. This is not going to change the makeup of who's in the city and who's not. If someone gets annexed into the city, then they will be part of the city and be their governing body will be city council. If they're outside of the city, they'll be within the jurisdiction of the county commissioners. Not sure if that's what you're asking for. I mean, it's not going to change.
We have 9 council members.
Okay.
And we have 3 wards.
Mhm.
And they're more or less mapped based on population.
Sure.
So how will this boundary is going to change? Are we going to increase the council? Are we going to, redraw lines? What's going to happen?
Well, I think what happens is over the time as these areas fill in and they get populated, then every so many years, I think it's during the census, when they do the census, then they move the lines according to the populations that the census reports. And redistricting, they do that, they do redistricting, and that's what redistricting is for.
But there are people living in the planned annexed portion of the plan,
Okay,
and they will not have representation on city council, even though they'll be annexed by the city. So I think the governance plan needs to come along with the annexation.
okay. So if they're annexed into the city, they will be able to vote in the city. They'll be part of the city. Annexation means they become part of the city.
Where are going to be the ward boundaries? What ward are they going to belong to? I want to see a plan. You're talking about a growth plan?
And maybe Derek can answer that. It's like, I don't know, as people annex, I'm not sure. I guess they just go into the ward where it ends. I mean, that's, but I don't know that for sure, so.
Yeah, finish up
Yeah.
what you got, then I'll get up there, I can answer.
I appreciate
So,
it.
I mean, and really, that's all I have. But unless there's other questions that I can answer, I'll be. Maybe Derek.
Chair Commission, so I won't repeat anything David said that he answered. So to the latest conversation on boards, so what happens when somebody is annexed? So first off, right, this isn't an annexation plan. It's not what this is. This is a growth plan. As this plan goes through the process and through the years, people will annex, some people won't. So that's in the plan. But in the event somebody does want to annex and goes through that process, when that person comes to the city and petitions for annexation, they are assigned their ward. It is done as part of an ordinance that the council approves, and that they will be assigned to one of the 3 wards depending upon the location. And in Laramie, growth is fairly slow and annexation is fairly slow. We do about 1 or 2 a year. And so your population increases aren't dramatically shifting your wards. And so what we will do is we will assign to the most logical ward, which is usually not very complicated because it's really an extension of where they're already at. And then, as I think David mentioned, every census cycle, those are re-looked at for total population based upon the census numbers, and they readjust just like they recently did this last year. So, and so every time when someone annexes, when they file that petition with the city, we then go through the process of where they assign the ward. We assign school district location, voting precincts for state level as well, because those are all different. And those are all just done through where they are on the map and then through city council and the city clerk.
So to clarify, the city cannot annex anybody unless they petition to be annexed. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So now I don't understand the growth plan.
So I mean, annexation that's occurring currently in the, in most recent years, someone comes to us and says, we want to be in the city. And they go through the process of coming into the city through annexation and zoning, 2-step process. And then usually it's accompanying some sort of development proposal. A lot of times it's a subdivision. They're dividing land maybe for housing or for commercial use, whatever that is. And so it's driven by the property owner. There are provisions in state statute that cities can forcibly annex properties. But that's in this plan, that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about where people are wanting to grow, where the community's wanting to grow, and then where people are wanting to come into the city to receive the services that the city provides. So.
And pay city tax.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they would be just like any other city resident. So what happens is, once they complete that process in front of council, which is done by an ordinance, then at that point, they're in the city. Their boundary changes, so the city boundary line will change. The county is notified, usually the assessor wants to know that, and the county clerk. And so through all that, they receive our ordinances, and so they kind of know that that's happening, and then all of our stuff gets changed, and people they're assessed different amount of mill levies, really is what it comes down to. So that kind of, I think, answers that question. I was going to note too, as David mentioned, the city does have a Parks and Recreation master plan. That plan doesn't, though, include areas outside the county. The county chose not to adopt that plan during the process when we worked with the county on that. And so The areas that are outside, we've left for the county to figure that out. And so any areas within the city, we do have planned out, even if they're undeveloped areas. And then in terms of the sewage, it seems like there's a lot of discussion about it. Specifically, it's map 13 page, or the map on page 13, it's map 2. We had heard during some of the comments during the last version and some of the public hearings and meetings that we held about confusion about that map. And so I want to clarify, if you look at the text in there, we clarified the language. The map there represents where the city of Laramie has studied and evaluated extensions of water and sewer lines. This map in this section of the plan doesn't say we are extending water and sewer lines in those areas, but it's a reflection of where we've looked at the feasibility of water and sewer lines. And so what we felt was important is showing that we have evaluated as a community where these lines may be able to go. Now, it also doesn't though say in here that they're how costly they are, except for these very broad numbers that we provided to show the gravity of kind of the discussion that we were talking about, is that an expansion of the potable water system, like to go out and do all the things that we've studied, is a huge number. Same for water, it's a very large number. And what I think is important about the context of the growth plan is to say, we're not going to just blow up and spread out in all directions with all of this infrastructure in all directions where the growth plan projects growth. It's just not financially feasible. We know that. But it's important to maybe put that into context for everyone that's looking at this plan to understand that as we grow, whether it's north, south, east, west, wherever the plan shows, is that it's going to cost money to extend those services, and trying to put it into at least some sort of perspective that it's a high value piece of the part of growth really is the extension of those services. You know, if someone wants to really dig into the real costs, there's the city has these studies available that gets you into the details. But for this plan, what we tried to do is keep it very high level so that you understood it is very costly to do. It's going to require a lot of dollars if you wanted to really do everything. But then also too, to show where we've looked at how feasible it is to extend so that you could go look at those studies if you felt that it was important to evaluate that and try to figure that out in a certain area, depending upon which study you're looking at for both water and for sewer. So I think that's
There are sewer, detailed sewer and water maps. The bottom of the plan.
Correct.
Don't match each other.
so.
In some places, they're only water lines, and others they're only sewage, some of them both. So I don't understand, so
Okay.
maybe my problem is, right, I'm a newcomer. I don't understand the purpose of this document. I thought this was the growth plan. And all I'm getting is, this is a bunch of maps that we wish, including recreation and parks. There is a whole segment here on parks and recreation. I don't understand why we're doing this. What's the point? If we are not actually planning anything, why are we doing this?
You want me to say something, David, or you want to come up first, or what do you want? Sure. I don't know. So I don't want to steal your meeting.
I mean,
Yeah, so the purpose of this plan, as with a comprehensive plan or other plans or the CAP plan, they're our foundation, right? We're setting the stage with general policies to accomplish something. So what you're asking, what are we trying to accomplish? Well, what we're trying to accomplish is when someone comes in and wants to develop and they're near the city of Laramie, what does the planning office, the county planning office tell them? So I guess what I'm saying is, like, so if somebody comes in right next to the city limits, and it's like, wow, this looks like it should be annexed, or maybe it shouldn't be annexed, or we're trying to determine what we tell people when they come in and want to do something that's right within this area that could be hooked into the city. Right now, the county can't tell someone, hey, you got to go annex into the city if you want to do this. You need water and sewer to do this. We just have, what our regulations are. We can say, okay, yeah, if you want to develop into 5-acre lots across this whole area, that's fine. But now what does that do? That now blocks the city from, extending their services, extending the roads, extending water and sewer. We don't want that to happen. So the plan is to help us to logically allow people to develop in a way that both the city and the county are on the same page. So that we're not conflicting in the things that we're talking to people about. And so that we're not, one, blocking off city's expansion into the county. And two, just so that we're working together and know what we want to have accomplished. So once we get that foundation of this plan of how we want things or how we perceive things developing as it comes into the county, then this will lead to regulations. Obviously, that's the tool to ensure that development develops the way basically we're planning for. We're planning for this future development and how we want to see it so that it is done properly and it's not boxing in the city. And then
That is great. I understand this, and I hate to stop you.
Okay.
But if this is our plan, and then we say, but this is just, vague, and we don't really mean to, we don't have the money to put the water lines in all these places, so this is just a wishful thinking. And this is just, this map is not, this zone is maybe going to be residential, this zone is not, it's just, yeah, but are we going to? I'm sorry. I may need to talk to you in person because
Okay.
this does not make any sense to me.
okay,
In terms of planning, if you have a plan and you have a cost associated with it, and you have regulation associated with it, and you have all the details, I understand. But I don't understand this. I don't.
well, the one thing that I could maybe clarify a little bit, and I think Derek kind of touched on this, is we're not trying to. The county and the city are not going to be putting in infrastructure. We're not going to be the ones that are paying for people to do things. When private people want to come in and they want to develop and they want to have these services and they want to do things, they're going to be the ones that take care of it. I mean, the cost of, like, we get the big map with the cost of everything, all the utilities of what it could be to develop all this out. Well, in reality, this is going to be done incrementally as people come in and want to develop. They annex into the city, they extend the services, they extend the roads. Somebody else comes in. That's how it's supposed to play out. But I don't know if there's something at this point you want to do to help clarify, because and maybe it would take a good discussion just to kind of go through things.
I think the only thing that I would add is, remember, this is the first step in the process being directed to us by the county commissioners and the city council, and really, if I was to summarize it, you want to take a look at the growth map on page 38 of the document. That's what this whole plan boils down to. That map provides the foundation of how the community anticipates to grow, how we anticipate growth occurring in this area. And as David mentioned, as we work on an intergovernmental agreement and regulation, that will detail out a lot of the things that I think you're concerned about, which is what is going to be the requirement? Who's going to put in water, sewer? What types of streets are going to go in? What's the density going to look like based upon these land use categories? And it's just that next process. And if I was to put it into perspective related to your other plan that you're talking about, it's going to be when the regulations come, and how does the plan provide guidance to the regulations that are being proposed and considered? And so, this isn't all encompassing. We know that. We weren't charged with doing that. We were charged with coming up with a plan for growth, uses, densities, locations of where we were gonna grow. But it wasn't intended to get into all the details and evaluate every single aspect. We have other plans that do that. I mean, even the county just recently completed a natural resource plan. I mean, David will still look to that plan to ensure that these things work together. That is our job as planners. We're gonna take the breadth of information that we have and try to assemble it and make good decisions. And to make predictable decisions. That's really kind of the big thing between the city and the county is for a long time, we can't provide predictability, and that's what we hope the plan does.
Mr. Haynes, you have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Well, first, let me just say that a lot of my concerns about the plan were alleviated when I had more discussions with Mr. Gertz about the level of conversations that went on with some of the larger property owners in the growth area. That I was wanting to make sure that the bigger property owners were involved in the discussion and were on board with seeing their, like now, actively agricultural area be turned into housing. And all those conversations sounded like they happened, and that made me feel a lot more at ease about the plan. I guess a question that I have is if you're able to summarize what were some of the concerns that the city planning commission raised. I was, the burden is mostly on the county to change our regs to realize the plan in a lot of ways. And so I was surprised that the planning commission with the city was not unanimous in their support of it. And I'm just curious if you can summarize what were the concerns that prevented some people from voting for it.
Chair Commission, I think one person, I don't know, there was no comments made one way or the other, so I can't really provide that. One of the no votes related to it was related to the financial aspect of it. I would say that I'm still personally unclear as to the concern on the financial aspect, kind of as David mentioned. The financial component of that, and then what's in the plan and the high numbers, is to provide perspective once again, to show that this isn't just an easy thing to do. What is important about that is, right, we have to make sure that not only the public, but our elected officials understand that we can't just grow to the north 3 miles and it's just easy to do and it doesn't cost anything, right? Try to put that in perspective, but that seemed to be the high cost of a plan, and that infrastructure seemed to be the reason why that was a concern. And I would say that those were the two large that was really the large concern, and the one that I can relay to you that I feel comfortable about, like assuming why they voted the way they did. So
You couldn't mind read on the other person.
my mind reading is poor. So
Okay,
that's what I would
thanks for
say.
explaining, for summarizing that. Yeah, I guess I don't have any other questions. I sort of see the meat of this is coming in the future. Well, I guess there is another question. The intergovernmental agreement, that will be open for public comment as well, right? That the public can comment on the content of that, or is that strictly between the elected officials?
It'll go through just a normal, it'll go through a public process, yeah.
Because it
Yeah.
seems to me the meat of this is yet to come with the IPA and the regulation changes, that's really where a lot of heavy lifting is on this, implementing this plan. Thanks for answering.
Well, since you are both here, and you haven't mentioned IGA, have you all discussed incorporating some aspect of incorporating city development code into the county as part of the IGA? Has that been part of the discussion yet, or?
I don't think we've discussed that too much. I mean, building code is kind of came up, but it's it's kind of outside of the scope of what we're doing. You know, and if as folks annex, then obviously they'll have to build to have building code. But if anything in the city, I mean, that takes a delegation from, or anything, excuse me, outside of the city. In the rural areas, that takes a delegation from the state of Wyoming to do that. And we have not received that delegation. And it has not been an interest to the point where it's been discussed seriously since I've been here. But you know, those things can change. I mean, some of the things that you have to consider is, you know, that would take, you know, additional staffing. And expertise to do something like that. And it will be discussed, it will continue to be discussed in the county. And at some point, I believe that we will have building code, but yeah, with this plan and with the agreement. I mean, the only way to make that work is the county would have to basically say, yeah, in this area, we want to do code, but we'd still have to get the delegation, we still have to hire staff. Or, I mean, I guess there's other options to look at as well, but that's not been really part of this.
Because the city has expressed interest in having housing conform to building code on any number of developments that we looked at. And is that correct, Eric?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a fairly standard comment that we've put into our
Okay,
review comments that I think come to you eventually. Yeah.
any further discussion or questions for? the
So
staff?
if a person knew they wanted to be annexed, it would make sense to build the code because they would have to come up to code before they could annex. So, yeah, is that right?
No, it doesn't mean that necessarily when let's say there's an existing house out county and they decide to annex their parcel in for whatever reason. Not necessarily, no. It's our preference, yes. But it's not a requirement, but long-term, what our purpose of those comments that you all see is kind of putting that out there because there's a wide variety of standards that you can build something at. And sometimes it's not that different. It's not saying that things that are built are not properly constructed. It's just that there could be a situation where, and I would say a lot of times think commercial buildings, things that require things like sprinkler systems and other things that usually aren't going to get built in the county. They may be more difficult for us to annex. There have been times throughout the time that I've at least been here where people have talked to us about annexation, where we've not desired to annex properties because of the structures on the site for safety, life, health, and safety concerns. It's not very often, but it's why we put that comment out there to kind of put that on everybody's radar.
So people should think about it.
But people should think about it, yes,
When
agree.
they're building in this zone, right?
It would make sense, it would make it very streamlined if they did eventually, so.
Okay, well, thank you. We'll move on to the public hearing in that case. If there are members of the public who would like to make a comment about the growth area management plan, please indicate so, and I'll recognize you to step forward.
Chair and the Albany County Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm Sylvia Diadonis, and I'm here speaking on behalf of the board of the Albany County Clean Water Advocates. And I have copies for you. I wasn't sure how many would be here. So pass these out. Our comments pertain to the Laramie area growth plans for trail of future development in the Aquifer Protection Overlay Zone, or APOZ. We are concerned about the map on page 32. First, the fine gradations of yellow under the cross hatching make the map hard to read, but it appears to show areas of rural residential, 5 to 35 acres, ranchettes, 2 to 5 acres, estate residential, 1/3 acre, and a suburban residential, 1/4 to 1/8 acre. Aqua members met with the growth plan authors when the project began and were assured that the aquifer protection concerns would be placed first and foremost. This does not appear to be the case. The county already has regulations in place for a minimum lot sizes of 35 acres, with one dwelling unit allowed on existing undeveloped smaller parcels. And of course, existing development on parcels of any size remains in place. But there should not be a suggestion of additional small parcel development within the APOZ, nor of extension of city water and sewer into currently unserved areas of the APOZ as shown on the map on page 13. Such extension seems to be based on the assumption that once residences are on city water and sewer, there are no further aquifer protection considerations. Aqua believes this assumption is unproven at best. Urban runoff is an obvious concern, along with the use of pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers on lawns, which is impossible to police. Stormwater detention ponds associated with additional development would not be desirable, as they would allow potentially contaminated water to soak into the aquifer. Along the same lines, it is important to ensure that stormwater runoff from paved areas in commercial and office zones, such as those shown in the city portion of the APOZ on the map on page 32, be conveyed out of the APOZ. We realize the proposed plan is a plan, it's not a regulation. However, even a plan should reflect what is currently on the ground, along with already established goals such as the aquifer protection. At the same time, with the Laramie area growth plan, the city and county are investing heavily in updating the Casper Aquifer Protection Plan, or CAP. At a minimum, the growth plan should be congruent with the CAP and its aquifer protection recommendations. Thank you for this opportunity to comment.
Anyone else? Let's see if we have anyone online. In that case, we have a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? No, in that case, we'll vote. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. We'll close the public hearing. All commissioners. Full discussion.
I have to say that I completely agree with the comments. They reflect a lot of my concerns. So thank you.
Mr. Chair, I guess when I was looking at page 33 map, they're looking at. I guess this could be a question for staff to tell me if my interpretation is wrong. Because the rural residential signage of future land use allows lots from, is it 5 to 35 acres? One dwelling per 5 to 35 acres. I was assuming that the zoning resolution would be guiding the requirement for the minimum lot size of 35 acres based on the recent regulation change. And that anything smaller is because it's already existing. And so maybe I'm interpreting this wrong. Is there undeveloped land in the APOZ that could be smaller than 35 acres? Given the reg change that we made?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, yeah, the zoning rules on this, so there will not be anything that's less than 35 acres. The intent was to show what's existing in that area. That was the intent of what we've been trying to show in that map, so. Because there's no intention to. I mean, unless there's annexation that occurs, and then I guess that would change what could
Can't
happen.
change the
Yeah.
rule about what.
But if it's in county and will be on septic and well, we would have to follow the zoning regardless of what this plan says or whatever.
So everything that's shown in the APOZ is already there, like you can see where Tumbleweed is, right?
Correct.
Commercial, and where Sherman Hills is and where. Imperial Heights. So that there isn't any new development proposed in the APOZ in this plan.
Correct, that was the intent, yes.
So I guess it's just that if land is annexed in, that opens up the opportunity for someone to divide on the smaller lots, like they can right now in the APOZ within city limits. You can, and they are being built, subdivisions over the APOZ, where then the city planning commission is having to decide whether to approve a subdivision. And they have the ability to condition the approval with whatever they can to limit harm to the applicant. So the city is currently allowing subdivisions over the APOZ within the city boundary. And it's up to the planning commission to decide whether to condition those approvals with protective measures to the best of their ability, or to the extent that the regulations or the Unified Development Code allows them to. So I guess short of all you could do to either eliminate the chance for things to get annexed into the city would be to amend where this boundary is shown on the map on page 33, to shrink the boundary down to like the existing development out there at Sherman Hills and Imperial Heights, and remove the potential for annexation of things further up slope. So that would be one way we could address the concern.
So for example, the Laramie Estates, right? You guys all know about that plan.
Where are they?
And they are going to have as high density as Imperial Heights. They're going to connect water, city water and sewage. But again, there is no control of lawns, fencing is a big issue, is traffic. Laramie is like south of Imperial Heights. It's a proposal. 55 homes on. There's a new park, city bought the land, correct me if I'm wrong. Above that lot, that parcel. And the developer agrees to have a green connection to the Imperial Heights Park. I'm calling it Laramie Estates. And it's right on Aquifer. And if we are concerned about aquifer, it's a big issue, not necessarily because of the septics, but we know that a lot of people fertilize their lawns and runoff. Yeah, so I think we need to put more thought into the details of the map on page 32 from various aspects, as I mentioned in my list of 11 topics, and then clarify some of the confusion or concerns. That would be my recommendation. So if I'm concerned, and you guys are concerned, I'm sure there are a lot of other people who are concerned.
So just to clarify what I said, so it appears that area in there, this is the developed area, what it's showing. And what it's showing is this yellow, looks like it's a state, which would allow 3 dwellings per acre. But that's only if annexation occurs. If the existing zoning would continue unless the intention of this map is once we create a regulation or a potential overlay zone for this, is that those areas will develop at those densities once annexation occurs and not, or water and sewer are available. I guess annexation doesn't have to necessarily be there, but if there's centralized water and sewer and not septic and well. So I don't know if I said that. I just want to make sure that that's clear. That's what's being shown.
Well, nearly 2 months have gone by since we discussed this at our March meeting. Very plan. I also note that one of the slightly confusing things about this, for people who are just casually looking at this for the first time, is we're talking about the Woodbury Amendment Plan. This thing tonight, when in fact it's just a small piece of the whole Woodbury Amendment Plan, and the same name. This is just the very beginning step. And as I was about to say, 2 months have gone by since we put the plan out for public comment. And I'm not aware of anything that's changed substantially in the plan. I don't think we've had all that much comment, have we, David?
We've had a few.
Yeah.
Comments, but not a lot.
In the meantime, the city planning commission has gone ahead and approved this plan and recommended for approval of the city council, I believe. Our staff supports the plan. And I support the plan. Go ahead.
I thought we got 2 comments about the,
Nancy about that.
yeah,
Well, we had some comments, but we haven't had a lot of comments. That's all I would say.
Yeah, I've got a question.
Oh, sure.
So if we took, one of those comments was suggesting there not be any growth east of town because of the aquifer. So if we took that boundary that goes out, south Pilot Hill, and we just condensed that down and said we're not gonna grow that direction, would that mean that we just lose control over it? Or, I mean, it's still owned by private people, right? What would be the effect of doing that, of just shrinking that boundary down to where the city, where it's already developed? What would happen then?
I'm not sure there would be much of an effect. I mean, you would just condense the boundary and then that's not shown on the map. Now, if somebody in that area wanted to annex and develop at city standards, this plan just wouldn't guide any of that. They could do denser development, I guess.
But the county regs would address that, because it would be in the county.
Well, if it's annexed in, it wouldn't be in the county. If the city, if someone was in that area and wanted to receive water and sewer and they annexed, then they would be able to grow at a denser way, where right now it's not, nothing's gonna happen up there. There's in the aquifer protection area, nothing, I mean, other than 35-acre tracts can happen right now.
Okay, so it's actually more protective to leave it the way it is than to condense it down.
I mean, essentially it could be, yeah, because then there's a standard that the city would then apply. If somebody came in and annexed, instead of doing, oh, we're gonna do, 5,000 multifamily units or something. They don't do that here, but they could do much denser development if they got specific zoning. This limits it to that. Well, it kind of limits it. It guides it to be the estate, which is 3 dwellings per acre, which, I mean, that's pretty, that's not very dense when it comes to city development, really, so.
So, Mr. Gersh, the idea in the intergovernmental agreement would be that you could create, as part of the agreement, what would or wouldn't happen with this land. I mean, like, could you prohibit rezoning? Say it got annexed into the city. Could you make it part of the agreement that shall not be zoned to a smaller size lot?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Our attorney's shaking his head no.
Well, we could.
We couldn't.
Well, yeah, if annexation occurs, which we have no part of as the county, then that is completely between the property owner and the city.
I mean, however, if in the agreement, it said that that we are all going to follow this plan and the densities that are shown in it, could that not be then applied to the city? I mean. That would be the agreement, right? As part of the city's saying, this is okay. Or they're saying, we'll give you this, and the county's gonna say, we want you to develop to these standards as well. Then everybody's going by the same plan and the same density, then it would be in that agreement, so.
In the IGA,
In the idea, yeah.
well, it could be.
Yeah, so I mean, that would be an option, I think.
So if you wanted, I mean, so nobody can stop someone from annexing it if the city boundary. Grew that direction. You couldn't stop a property owner from saying, hey, I want to annex. But you could still maintain a certain amount of control over it if you keep the boundary where it is, as opposed to shrinking it down through the vehicle of the IGA.
Correct, yeah, I mean, if the city said yes, yeah, right, the city said, yeah, we're going to do this as part of this agreement. Then when they receive the development, they would look at that agreement and say, hey, this is what we've said we would do, and that should be what happens, so, yeah. I mean, ultimately, like Matt was saying, if annexation occurs, we really don't have any control, but that agreement would kind of hold their feet to the fire a little bit. So.
Eric, did you want to say something?
If I could.
I think you've spoken. Sharing commission, I think to the point about modifying the area. David hit it on the nail. If it's not in this map, we can't work together to put together an intergovernmental agreement and joint regulations to properly address the concerns that we have, whether they're aquifer related concerns or the general growth area concerns. The area that you see in that map is what's already developed. They're tracts that have been subdivided in the county through different subdivision processes and different subdivision processes allowed by the county. At the densities that they're at, there's no increases in them. And I think that that's really important to point out, because we have to at least acknowledge that they exist there. And in a growth plan, it's logical that we'll see existing areas that are developed for growth pressure. This gives us the vehicle to actually work together, develop plans, talk about densities, talk about those standards that we know, whether they're stormwater standards, right? We were talking about that earlier, road standards, densities, zoning, all that I mean, the hope is that we work together and we come up with it. So it's just a known, predictable decision before it ever happens. So we think I would highly recommend it remain and not be modified. I think it's how it should be and gives us that tool to put together the intergovernmental agreement and regulations on both sides are governing, levels of the city and the county. So that's all I was going to mention. So
And keep in mind, please, that I'm sure the city is just as interested in keeping the water clean as we are now and going forward. Because I have no concerns about that. Well, in agreeing to chair this meeting, I didn't give any of our rights, which includes the right to make a motion. I believe that again, little has changed in the last 2 months in terms of change the surface plan, the signal plan, or any of the details of it. There's been opportunity for public comment in this period and tonight. We do have a recommendation from our staff. The city is going forward. They're waiting for action for us. And I think it's time for us to act. And therefore, I move that we certify the plan with recommendation of the county commission to approve. Is there a second?
I do, just to help, the city planning commission with their legal requirements, within that motion, if it could also be, to concur with, the city planning's commission, or city planning commission's, certification of the plan.
So how would you say that?
Okay, so it would be a motion to certify the Laramie growth area plan to the Board of County Commissioners and concur with the City Planning Commission's certification or adoption and certification of the Laramie growth area management plan.
Okay, how about going to the very last part again? Concur.
Yes, and concur with the city planning commission's adoption and certification of the same.
Therefore, please take motion. I move to certify the Laramie growth area plan with a recommendation to the county commissioners to approve and to concur the city planning commission adoption and certification of same.
I'll second.
Further discussion of the motion. See none, so in that case, we will vote, the roll call, Stephen. Mr. Ben David,
No,
Commissioner Henning,
Aye.
Commissioner Cornick.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion carries. Thank you for all of you who have worked on this. And is there any interest in taking a brief break? Before we go on the next item? Nope. Nope. Okay. In that case, we'll move on to the CAP update. Kurt.
Chair Commissioners, so at your last, well, I guess at a special meeting on April 26th, Planning and Zoning Commission approved following amendments. The amendments that were approved by the City Planning Commission to the Casper Rock Protection Plan. And then the amendments to the Casper Rock Protection Plan appendices presented by Vern Hinkley. So since this meeting, discussions have occurred between city staff, county staff, Stantec about the comments received on April 26th. Staff and Stantec are reviewing these comments and provide. Well, I have an analysis, I guess, of those comments. And also some planning and zoning commission members have also provided some analysis of those comments that we received as well. And so we can determine whether we want to include some of those comments or not include. I will also note that Planning Commission actually met and they approved the amendments to the appendices that were made by this commission here. So at this point, we're on the same document until we start going through these comments. So really, I guess it's up to you how you would like to proceed. I guess maybe I would suggest just going through these comments one by one, if you would like. My recommendation would be anything that Stantec did not, I believe should be considered. That we not even address those, we just kind of move past those, unless there are some that you would like to
say it again.
If you would like to skip those
Okay.
those things that Stantec said no to, the red on their document, I would recommend that we do that because unless there's something you want to address in those, we can skip over those. But then he has the green, which is the ones he likes, and then the blue, which is more kind of questions and information. And I went through those for the most part. I agree with Stantec's recommendation. There's a few that he's approved that I think requires some discussion by this commission to determine whether we want to open up for analysis some of these documents that are been provided. I think at this point, I guess I would just say that you've all received the documentation that was provided in the comments, and the comments are the ones from Ms. Starkey. So you've all received those. You've had the chance to digest those, and now we can make a decision on what to do with those. Because there is some good data that has been provided. And I guess it's up to you whether to include that in the plan now or save that for a later date, so.
Okay, thank you. Question from Mr. Ayers. I mean, we made amendments tonight, which did not reflect any substantial changes to the plan. Would we be in a position to certify the plan tonight if we chose?
Yes, if you were certified as amended.
All right. In that case, commissioners, let me try to set the table for this, so we can try to proceed this in a relatively logical fashion. So bear with me, please. At our special meeting on April 26th, I think there's a reasonable chance we were going to be able to get to the point where we could at least vote on certifying the plan until we discovered the fact we had two missing appendixes. And that would have brought us in alignment with the city, I believe. Is that correct? Have we done that? Yes. I believe so also. The appendixes have been added. We have a clean version now with those appendixes added. And so now we are in the same position we were on April 26th, with the exception that on April 26th, we received a large body of comments very late in the game, which we did not consider that meeting. And those are comments, they were received in time, but that doesn't mean we have to act on them. We could choose to. And having thought about it and conducting some general discussion with Chairman Hinckley, I favor taking an approach that also Mr. Gertz basically just went through as well. I know that, you know that also that our consultant is going through his comments and giving them quite a good consideration and provided responses, as has Chairman Hinckley and has Commissioner Hanning. Ms. Hanning's comments did not make it into the packet tonight, but they're listed underneath the project section of the Planning Commission's website. So they're available for everyone to see and are now part of the public record, correct? That'd be correct. And in my own work to prepare for the meeting, I went through all the comments also. And first broke down the comments into two main categories: comments that would be essentially errata, edits or corrections that we would choose to make no matter who made them. And then more technical responses or comments. Which have been responded to by our commissioners and also Stantec. As shown in the packet. And I agree that we should not attempt to reconcile the differing opinions there. It's me tonight. I don't think we would be able to. I think what we can do, as Mr. Rich suggested, is go through the errata type comments one by one, work through them, see if we agree with them or not, or if we want to modify them there. And if we ever do that, adopt them as an amendment to the CAP plan and potentially certify this plan and recommend for approval. So that's the approach I would favor. Any comments or questions or discussion about that?
I have a comment. Why are we seeking public input if we choose to ignore it?
Well, we're not ignoring this. As I guess not, as you'll see, the suggestion, well, go ahead, Mr.
I mean, I guess what I would say is like, we don't want to ignore it. That's why we're considering it today. We're gonna go through these comments and you guys can discuss what you want to do with them. So they're not being
I mean, a lot of
ignored.
the technical comments, people put time into, you know.
Sure,
Sure. Yeah.
sure. I mean, we just have to consider them and then determine what we want to do with it. So, and that's up to this body, so.
And the suggestion Mr. Hinckley made was to take all these comments and when we get to the phase where down the road we're discussing regulation, to consider them again as they pertain to regulation and not to the plan here. And, take more time to develop a full response as we see that. So we're not going to ignore them at all. But we, again, as I'm suggesting, and Mr. Richardson is also, tonight, we'll limit our discussion. It's my suggestion, we don't have to do it, to errata. And things that don't make a substantial change to the plan, and again, have the goal of trying to be in a position where we certify the plan and return for approval if we chose to do that.
Mr. Birch, when is the next cap update scheduled for?
After this, there's nothing scheduled yet.
So this is the time where we can maybe reconcile many of the disagreements on. Given that there's more data that was provided, right? There was more data provided.
Yeah, we received some additional an additional report, at least, and some other information.
I have to say that I've used some data that I got from the city, and I've done some analyses on my own. And some of the things just don't make sense to someone who doesn't understand hydrology like me. I would like to further explore these. I'm finding very, very strange patterns between water level in aquifer and contaminant levels. Opposite of what one would expect from basic knowledge of hydrology, and I'd like to know why and how that might affect our understanding of the aquifer. So, I mean, given that a lot of people, I'm not just talking about Mrs. Starkey and Dr. Starkey, but others, and many other people have responded to those. It will be nice to actually settle all these issues with this maybe last for 20 years cap.
Mr. Chairman, yes.
Sure.
Go
ahead.
David, a question. So would you want to go through comment by comment or just focus on the ones where there was conflict between Stantec and Chair Hinckley and the comments that I made? If the consultant and the two members of our group that took the time to comment, we're all in agreement on, so like, say, for example, number one, we all agreed this is really just a land use plan and it need not, like, so would you still want to discuss those ones or just the ones where there's remaining division about how to handle it?
I think for the sake of efficiency, we should just do those where disagreements still exist. That the ones where everybody agreed, thank you, comments are correct, need to be amended, changed. I don't know, we need to spend time on that. But I'm willing to go comment by comment if necessary.
Maybe I could suggest, maybe you do just go through each one, but just really quickly, is like, are we okay with this? Yes, move on to the next. Are we okay with this? Yes, move on to the next one. And then if we hit one that we want to discuss, maybe we mark that, and then when we get through the whole document, we come back and review those, or I don't know, just. I don't know, Mr. Chair, whatever you want to do, you're in charge.
Yes. Do you have a list of the comments particularly that you're interested in?
It's very long list.
Well, there's a lot of comments here. It's
No,
like 30 some.
people put a lot of effort, and I would like to commend everybody that took the time to do these evaluations. I mean, people care, and it's great to live in a community where people care. So.
Agreed.
In that case, let's go through comment by comment.
Is there any way? Because many, comment number one, not everybody that commented on comment number one. Is there any way we can organize this somehow?
We can, because our attorney was kind enough to create a document that identified which ones we were in agreement on in terms of the errata.
Yep.
And which ones we were not, the three of us in agreement on how to resolve. And then the remaining ones not on the list were just Stan Tech and myself and Mr. Hinckley all agreed will. But by omission on this list, we can easily talk about it. I mean, if you just want to go down one by one. And Mr. Chair, are you okay with that?
I'm absolutely okay with that. Yeah.
But starting with comment number one. The three commenters, including the consultant and myself and Mr. Hinckley, we agreed that this comment was not on target because it's a land use plan. We're not using it as a wetland protection plan. And so what we're doing is within the statute of our ability and that we're within our zone of being okay with what we're doing.
You on this? I just saw the email now. I didn't see it this afternoon.
I'm looking at the start comments.
This one?
So it starts out with,
Well, I'm
cap version 5.0.
right, yeah, so number one, the capital has expanded the purpose.
Comments.
Okay,
Well, so
see, where is that?
Can you see that? If you go a little further down, you'll see that.
You're on a different version.
No, it's just further down. It's page 9 of 75.
All right, sorry. I just didn't, it's even here. Okay, now I'm in the right place.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So starting comment one, we
Hang on
all,
one second. We're trying to pull them up.
up there, what do you know?
It'll take a
That
minute.
would be great.
It's been one of those technology days though, so. you never
We
know.
can keep on going. That.
So-
Yeah, we can go.
Okay, so comment number two was just a mistake that everyone agreed we could revise accordingly.
Right.
And the same goes for number three.
And four.
And number four, we already actually changed at our last meeting when we fixed the appendix problem. So four has already been addressed. Five. The concern was about whether it's appropriate for a consultant to include their own previous work. And well, the three of us agree that shouldn't be a problem. It's very common in the business for a consultant to get repeat work on a particular project, mostly because they sort of have a leg up on their competitors and be very familiar with something. And additionally, each of those documents have been out for their own separate public comment and review. So we didn't have a problem with five. Six is another just editorial problem that needed to just be revised accordingly. Seven is the same, yeah. Then eight is probably the first thing we probably have to spend some time discussing, along with number 18 regarding the CAP network water sampling report that they did. So I don't know if we just want to sequentially talk about things as they come up, or footnote them to go back to them at the end.
We could do it in order, that's probably,
Okay,
whatever you want to, that's up to you guys.
so, yeah, this, we also talked about this at our at the meeting when we had not become familiar with the data, but I think Mr. Hinckley became familiar with the data when he saw it going in front of the Board of Commissioners for the regulation change, making the minimum lot size in the APOZ 35 acres. So Mr. Hinckley was aware of the data, but I don't think at that point we were yet, until the afternoon of the end of our public comment period and the day of our public hearing. And so I guess we have to decide what to do with the data. Stan Tech agreed that it could be useful to include the data in the report. I agreed that the data is it complements what we already have in there. It doesn't contradict what we already have in this app update. It complements it. It may even duplicate some of the very same wells that are anonymous. And it really comes down to, in my mind, what's left on the contract for Stan Tech to turn around and add in more data at this point. Like I disagreed strongly with the conclusions of the CAP network report. I looked at the data as being more complementary and congruence with what we already know out there. But I don't object to including the data. I would object to including the whole report as an appendix, because I disagree strongly with the conclusions that were made in the report. But it's sort of up to the contract managers whether there's time and money for Stan Tech to include this data at this point.
I have some comments. I don't know if they're directly going to answer your question, if I could make them. Okay, so I did a little research and I looked over this report. So one of the things that is stated here is that the data do not support the hypothesis that the septic systems are contaminating the aquifer or the public water supplies. That was not a conclusion in the report that was provided. It does not address septic systems in the report that was provided. So this conclusion is an opinion of, Ms. Starkey, who wrote this, right? I also would say that to that point, we have 3 other, and there's probably other studies, but there's the Wink study, that looked at the wastewater system in Sherman Hills, the Phase 2 Laramie Monitor Well Project report, and the East Laramie Wastewater Feasibility Study, all found an increase of nitrates in some of the wells, as well as this report. I mean, there were a few wells that were in the 5 milligrams per liter range, or 6. There were some that were up and down. There were some that were like 1 point whatever, but those ones that are above the 2 milligrams per liter, that's kind of the standard for what's naturally occurring, right? That doesn't mean that that's the same everywhere, but once you're in 5 and 6, I mean, that there may be some impact here there, this report kind of shows that. And really with this comment, they're not asking for this to be provided or put into the report or into the plan. As well as, did I tell you how many? So the CAP network report looks at 17 wells. The East Laramie studies, they looked at 115 wells. So there's a big difference in the amount of data that was collected. And I'm not saying this because this is not good data, because any data is good data when it comes to the aquifer protection area. But to their point, if the reason that they want to include this is to say that septic systems shouldn't be regulated, or we shouldn't, require any additional standards, the report doesn't support that, and it's not even talked about. So in the CAP network report. So I'm just bringing you that information to do with what you want.
So your interpretation of the comment isn't so much please include our data in the cap update. It's really just like, hey, please consider our data in the context of everything that we're talking about.
I mean, that's, yeah, I don't know what the, I mean, if. You know, they were here to talk or whatever, they can explain what the intent was, but I don't know.
I thought their point was that their samples were taken over a much longer period of time.
Yes,
So there's
yes,
that, right?
there is that, yeah, absolutely. So that, it was 10 years that they did that. Where the East Laramie studies were 2 years in a row, and that was it. So,
Yeah, so that I think is a bit different.
absolutely, because it does have those graphs and that kind of show the trends or whatever. So. Which is good data. Like I said, there's good data in this report.
So I related to this, and again, part of this is that I'm not a hydraulic. I don't understand much of what happens on the ground, but I took the spur 1 and spur 2 data because part of my concern, as I mentioned, for the growth plan is the effects of climate change on water table. And so I looked at the data from spur 1 and spur 2 and looked at water table data and tried to find a correlation. I know Hinckley already did it, but I don't think they use data from the recharge zone. So I got data from the recharge zone in trying to figure out how recharge is happening using the data. And it's absolutely, completely difficult to figure it out. There is absolutely no logical explanation to what affects the water table level in the aquifer. It is not related to precipitation whatsoever. And when you try to do time lags and when you try to do snowfall versus summer precipitation, I'm still working on it. The models are going to be a little more difficult. But what was really interesting is there is contaminant or nutrient concentrations tables in the same report. And the water level changes depending on which monitoring well you look at, if 7 or 8 or 12. But I took the one that's deepest, the 12. And the water level can change up to 30 feet between the 80s, 90s, and today. And one would expect that then when you have more water in the aquifer, when water table is up, that you'll have more mix, that you'll have more dilution of contaminants. So you would expect to see a positive relationship between the water table height and contaminant levels, meaning when you have low water table, you have high contamination. And when you have high water table, you have less. It's the opposite. So the dynamics of the water flow in the aquifer relative to all these limestone boundaries may be not very simple.
You know, they're all simple.
I'm trying to figure out, you know, and actually, if the epsilon layer is confined, as Dr. Starkey is claiming, the situation will be even worse. So my point is that having that my analysis is confounded by the fact that we have more septic systems and more development in aquifer since back in the 70s. So is the increased contamination related to the density of septic systems? Or is it over time, or is it related to the water table? I mean, no, if it is increased density of waste water, then we have to, you know.
Or the other proposed, what the start he suggested was that it was inadequately sealed wells. Is another possible source of contamination.
I use the city's well.
Oh, okay.
So it's all, I assume the city wells
So
are.
Chris might be able to help you out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the city, the spur one and spur two are not even being used, right? Is that true? The city is not using the spur one and spur two?
They use the wells very infrequently, yeah. And whereas the Turner and these other areas, if there's points of discharge out of spur, there's no spraying. And very infrequent, not much pumping, so your convergence of flow in the area of those two spur wells isn't quite like what you have into at the Turner well field, then it's Silver Springs, where water is flowing
Right.
dynamically towards those.
Right.
Anyway, I think it bears additional study, to look at what you're suggesting. That there's a lot of water in the aquifer,
There's a lot of. water.
and even an increase in that amount, 20 or 30 feet over a long term that happened like from 2002 to 2020.
Actually, that increased and now it's going down.
Right, yeah, the water levels
The water
increased.
level went up.
Right, it went down in 2002, and then, I don't know, came in like, 2016 or 15, or it started bouncing back up dramatically. So
Well, actually, really,
if you're focusing on what the nitrate concentrations are during that rebound period of water levels going up. Boy, there's an awful lot of water for very little input. I mean, there's just not that much development out there, and what the actual changes are. I haven't looked at it in
I'll
that
be happy to
respect, so
send you the analysis I've done, but the point is, the relationship is very strong. It's opposite of what one would expect from dilution. And whether it is related to how the water is flowing within the aquifer through cracks and whatever, or it is actually increased input of septic systems over time. I still need to figure out,
but realize that the spur wells are not hydraulically connected to the area that people are concerned around Turner well fields. It's just the Sunset Acre development
Yeah.
is directly east of the spur wells, and there hasn't been additional development out there for a long time.
Well, there is a Timber Canyon. Is that part of it? Or is that,
Yeah, you're more familiar with what's
Yeah.
going on.
I don't know if
in
that's
that
part of
area.
it connected, so.
But
Sunset Acres is pretty much done. Yeah.
right, so around the Rogers Canyon area, there's
Yeah,
been
as you go around the curve.
how many homes?
They're still building out there. I see the cement trucks.
Out at Timber Ridge.
Yeah.
I don't know, there's a lot of.
Anyway.
Yeah, no,
I think
my point is that
well, they're outside of the APUs, right? So they're just north of the boundary of the cap, the Timber Ridge
The-
development.
Satanka,
It's on the north side.
oh, they all over the Satanka.
They're just north of the boundary of the cap.
right, well. My gut feel is that there just wouldn't be enough new development out there. And with the flow direction and no real convergence. Obvious convergence towards those wells, and it would be a pretty heavy lift. To say that it's being caused by additional development out there, but I think it's an exercise worth doing, to see.
40-acre
Yeah,
lots
they're
out
huge
there.
lots. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of water out there. It's an interesting question. I don't have the answer for it. Straight up.
Ms. Davis, are you suggesting we should amend the document based on comment number 8 or not?
I mean, I think it would be nice to include the data
Well, let's have a question then.
in the table and the cap.
Do we have a motion to either include or not include this data?
I don't know if we include it.
Is there a second?
If we can afford to, I don't know what our budget is. I think it would be better to include it than not.
What about making your motion around, or just, agreeing to include the data with, but it's up to sort of the grant managers if it's possible to do I don't know what the contract limitations are of when the money and or the time runs out. That's the part I.
Maybe they can put it in but not analyze it. I don't know.
See what they come up with.
Wishing me home.
I know sooner.
Okay, we include this information without.
How would you like it included? I guess that's the question.
I have a potential.
Sure, go ahead.
I move we include the CAP network data in table 3-4 and figure 3-8 of the CAP update. So long as there is enough contractual time and money left for Stantec to.
Table 3-4.
It's table 3-4. That's the one that has all of it's the compilation of city data from private wells. And figure 3-8 is sort of their color coding of what range of nitrate was found in those private domestic wells. So it would add to the body of data that's already been collected for the private wells in the catch. Or in the EQs. So and Stantec would have to add a paragraph that discusses, just like they have a paragraph for the USGS report, and they have a paragraph for the city sampling, there would need to be a paragraph about what the CAP network did. And I think it's also a place for Stantec to weigh in on what I think are erroneous conclusions drawn in that report. So I don't know if that makes it messy, but
And what data are we including?
the 10-year and the quarterly sampling. In some instances, the quarterly sampling had higher concentrations than the annual sample. And in my mind, it should have all been plotted on a single graph instead of two separate.
Okay, so basically the graphs that were provided.
Well, I think it's just taking the raw data,
Taking all the well
all
data.
the data from Appendix A of the CAP network. And applying that, the way Stantec has all the other data, to tables 3-4 and figure 3-8. And they would have to create a paragraph that talks about the report, similar to the USGS report in the city sampling report, all of the sort of discrete moments of data collection that were discussed in paragraphs. Stantec would have to add a paragraph to talk about the state.
Yes, which I suppose to David's question of whether that would be a substantive amendment or not. It depends. We're gonna have to see what exactly Stantec does. And I think because of that, I would highly advise that you see that before this commission certifies the plan to the county commissioners.
Would be republished as well?
If it's it depends.
Substantive, right?
If it's substantive, then yeah, kick back 30 days, but again, the substantive distinction is. Was this kind of amendment within the sort of subject matter, which was initially, noticed for the CAP? Yes. And I guess then it comes down to a much more fact specific inquiry of would a reasonable person have been properly noticed of this sort of possibility? From the notice that was provided.
Well,
And I would need to see that, because the issue is that, there is no Wyoming case law on substantive versus non-substantive amendments. We have to look out of state for that, and it is a fact specific inquiry, so.
if the conclusions don't change the interpretation of the data, then is that still a gray area on whether that's a substantive change that kicks it back into?
That goes farther towards it not being a substantive amendment. And I suppose, to the extent that it changes the discussion. If it's just, plugging in what I guess 17 extra data sets towards the existing. How many did you say?
I'm not sure how many. I need to-
Oh, okay,
That was just a report.
oh, those reporters, okay, my apologies. Then, if the comparison is that, this is a somewhat small amount of data in comparison to the amount which is already being utilized for this plan, then that's a stronger argument that it's not substantive, so.
Sounds like a big risk to take.
If there,
To slow down where we are. With what is in my mind, more of the same data we already have.
well, if you're going to, if you are going to direct Stantec to incorporate it. Then you should absolutely wait until you see
Right.
what comes back and not certify it blindly. But. I think that this is certainly in line with the subject matter of the cap that was properly noticed. And if it's just a comment then stating that this data has now been incorporated and nothing else changes, well, there's a strong argument that that's not a substantive change.
And I believe we should limit ourselves to doing that.
If it is a whole new analysis utilizing that data with an explanation,
Yeah, Mr. Chair. What I would say is if we do this, this would put us past our contract deadline. And so we would probably have to, amend the contract. They're done June 30th. And yeah, this will push back the project quite a bit if we do make this change. Not that we can't do it, I'm just letting
I'll
you know.
withdraw my attempt at the motion, if you want to go forward with the motion, but I'm gonna withdraw my helping your motion.
We're not gonna look at it again for another decade. Seems like we should make it as good as we can with what we have now, but.
Well, there's two pieces again. Yeah, this plan, which is a good plan,
It is good.
and it's going to lead to regulation if this plan's adopted.
Oh, so you look at it in seconds.
Exactly, and that was the gist of Commissioner Hinckley's suggestions was to incorporate these errata. Or tonight. And save all these other comments for further discussion, some kind of regulation. As we see that. We're not gonna ignore them though.
How are these comments going to be formally? Are we going to create a new document that will amend the caps with these data? Or how are they going to become a formal part of the process?
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I do have to push back a little bit on Mr. Hinckley's take on that. These are comments to the cap, not to regulations. We are not considering regulations currently. And that when we get to the regulatory part, we have our basis for those regulations with the cap. So this is the time to address them in whatever manner this commission sees fit. Do not kick this down the road, is my advice.
And what I would just add is, if you feel like this data is necessary and needed, then we need to do what we need to do to put it in the cap. If you don't think that it's needed and you've reviewed this, I don't think we have to put it in the cap. The one thing I would say is, there's not really a timeline to update the cap, but we can update it as often as we want to. So
Historically, we haven't, but.
historically, you are correct. Yes. It's been 12 years. so.
The other aspect of this
That's why I-
is including enough people that we have community buy-in. And a lot of people participated in having their wells sampled over 10 years, and I think that, their efforts are worth something. So I don't know if it's worth another month to postpone this or not, but that's another way to look at it.
Mr. Harris, try to put words in Mr. Good mouth, but I don't believe he was getting at addressing them. But considering making them part of the consideration when we're looking at rules. And taking them as part of the information body we can take a look at. We don't have to address these at all in any way. These are merely comments. So tonight, they're just comments that we do as you like, as we like.
So the definition of arbitrary action is action which does not take into consideration relevant information. Yes, you do not have to incorporate them. But there needs to be an explanation as to how they were considered.
And they've been carefully considered by Stan Tech, organically, Ms. Manning. Already, as published here in our packet tonight, it's clearly they've been given careful consideration by just those three folks. I've given them careful consideration as well, and
But the recommendation is that it should be reviewed and included after that.
Yeah.
review, right? That's what it said.
It says it should be
The
included.
impact said include, I said you could include, and Mr. Hinckley, I think, was starting to go to the other side.
Right.
And another point that Mayor Hinckley made was that there have been many more wells that the CAP network sampled that they did not choose to put in the report. So we know homeowners who had said that they had their wells sampled, and then their wells were not included in the ongoing sampling effort. So there's a certain body of well data that has not been chosen to be released to us at this time. We've been given a selected chunk of the sampling, if I understand it correctly. But I don't know. So sorry, go ahead.
So, my well, was part of the sampling that was reported to you and was included in a forward, sampling. I don't know why, because it was the best water in the world according to the report. So I don't know how certain wells were chosen or not. And I agree that, scientifically, we should have unbiased samples, not a subset that we like. But there is still value in these data. And I think including them in the cap will also create goodwill.
That's
Right. Yes, I agree with that.
Again, I'll invite a motion.
I would like to make a motion that, as recommended by Centec and Commissioner Henning, these data will be included in the cap as an appendix, not the report as a whole, but the data, with a caveat that they may not represent all the wells of the sector.
So now we can discuss it.
Okay, so we have a motion now on the floor, is there any further discussion? Yeah, that's a public. Great. Mr. Moody?
My name is Chris Moody, hydrogeologist. This is a large data set, many wells. It's brought after 10 years of work to this body at the 0 hour. Just dumping the data into an appendix, it then becomes, it's data there, but it hasn't been reviewed and analyzed, and the whole body of information looked at to say, how does this add to the body of knowledge of water quality in the Casper Aquifer? It is important data. We've been waiting for it for over 10 years. And now it's out there. So if you put it in the document as an appendix to the data without, as Commissioner Henning said, without, and more than just a paragraph, this is a non-trivial investigation to make sense out of this data. But to have you, in my opinion, you go all in or you don't go in at all. And all in is a good interpretation, review, analysis of the data and what it means that the county and the city can stand behind as a supplement to the body of knowledge of the Casper Aquifer. And if there's not time or money for someone to do that in this document, then, you know, boy, this should have been done 6 months ago to allow Stantec to do this, to dump this amount of data on the last day of public comment is not good faith. You know, this is a big deal. Now, I like the idea of saying we appreciate this data, we value it, it is important, and to have a technical amendment to the cap. Just because it's taken 12 years to do an update doesn't mean that a thoughtful review and integration of this data into the body of knowledge can't happen in 6 months or a year following this cap update, and that there would be some kind of amendment process to it. But I really caution you about just throwing something into a document like this, because it becomes a letter of the law. It's kind of like a verified important piece of information, and you don't know that yet. You don't know what that whole data set actually says. So I like the idea of respecting the data with a subsequent amendment to the cap that lays it out, what this data says. But going and just because you put the data in there and you have an analysis doesn't mean you're not going to have back and forth going on with these folks, and which will slow this whole process down considerably. So I don't know if that's guidance, but
I think to follow on to the statement about whether this was made in a good faith effort is that, Stantec held separate meetings with the CAP network at the very start of their process. That would have been a time for them to say, hey, I don't have it ready yet, but I'm gonna have data and I'll get it to you in this period of time. The next time where I feel like it wasn't a good faith effort was when they released that report. They skipped us in the public hearing process for the recent regulation changes to make the minimum lot size 35 acres. They skipped our commission with that report. And they went straight to the Board of Commissioners and did the same kind of late in the public comment period dump of information. And so I like you guys, I feel conflicted between the goodwill kind of concept, but it's the goodwill after bad faith kind of feel to it. Yeah, so I am really conflicted about this, I have to say, because I tend to be a goodwill, want to build goodwill, but there's been a lot of bad faith in getting to this point, over time. Not that can be the foundation for our decision right now. So we're not, boy, are we stuck on number 8, aren't we? We got it 35.
Yeah, I mean, like to the amendment late, technical amendment later idea, I mean, we need a consultant to do that analysis, right? We don't have that contract.
It's gonna cost you a ton of money,
Yeah.
you know, this is, I mean, a lot of
Is that
people.
an option? Do we have that? Or, I mean, time, but do we have the money to do that? Should we commit to doing
The city's got plenty of money, so.
that?
No, unfortunately, I cannot speak to, I guess, remaining funding, for Stantec at this point, right now, without needing to talk to, some other people. And, to clarify, I am not saying that the Planning and Zoning Commission has to incorporate this into the cap at this time. What I am saying is that what is to be done with this data in regards to this cap needs to be disposed of now. It does not make any sense for me to, at a regulatory stage, go back to planning. Once that planning has already been closed out. So, you know, whatever it is that the commission decides to do with this. It needs to be a principled decision. And that can be accomplished in a number of ways. So that was all I was hoping to say.
Ms. David, do you wish to withdraw your amendment?
You mean the motion?
Actually, the motion, we see that. Thank you.
Don't confuse me. That's a hard decision, it's conflicted.
Mr. Chair, if there's not a second to that amendment, then it dies.
Well, I believe it's Cory seconded. Did you or?
Oh.
Am I mistaken?
I might have, did I jump?
You did.
Take a vote.
Our reviewers suggested that we review it in detail and include it with the other data. That's what we have, right? Yeah.
No so much.
Well, your motion was to put it in.
And put it as a supplement.
Just the data. Yeah, and that's not what this says.
Okay, so I withdraw my motion. But the bad faith part is being about, and I just mentioned it.
Well, in that case, I'll offer a motion, and my motion is that I move that we not take any further action with regards to comment number 8. Is there a second?
And what happens?
Ways it becomes a public comment, as it is.
We have to justify our action.
Mr. Chair, could you please provide a brief rationale in that motion as to why?
I move we not take action on comment number 8. Based on the fact that we're being presented with an incomplete data set, a larger data set, without time and put money to analyze that and consider that for corporations compared to the capital checking plan.
Mr. Chair, can I offer an amendment to your motion?
Yes.
That additionally, the data supports the conclusion that the Casper Aquifer is impacted by contamination from septic systems. And it does not change the conclusions presented in the CAP.
Always a friendly amendment.
And I'll second your motion.
Further discussion. We'll have a vote. Mr. Baker.
Yes.
Mr. Gordon.
Come back to me.
Sam.
I'm conflicted, but I'm going to vote aye.
Mr. Gordon.
Aye.
And I vote aye also. So we'll move on to item 9.
Can I just say something?
Yes.
I feel really bad for Mary, who was sitting here just wanting to talk about something else. It's gonna go on a really long time. We probably should have amended the agenda to let her talk a couple hours ago. Is that possible at this point or not?
Fair.
I'm gonna interrupt you.
Table it, so. Can't you table it? You can table this item. And then take up the next item and then take off the table after that.
That sounds fine to me.
We have a long ways to go.
I'm not a parliamentarian. I didn't just.
I believe that we table this. Go out and vote on it. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, please.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I'm not familiar with this procedure as much as you guys are, but thank you. So what I'm wanting to present is the short-term rentals that are taking place in Centennial, in particular Rainbow Valley. We're finding more.
You repeat your name. Sorry.
Mary Clark. So we're noticing this past winter, we noticed a lot of difficulties. Certainly it was a harsh winter. And, you know, up there, you can't guarantee any road is passable any given day of the week. Short-term rentals are, you know, definitive check-in, check-out dates. And we've noticed that some renters were renting roads that were not maintained or plowed during the winter as part of the plan. It's up to the residents to kind of keep the roads open, much like Snowy Range Pass. It's not open all during the winter. Same with some of these roads. So quite a few of our residents had to rescue these people. And these people we found out weren't advised of the risk of how it's just different up there, or even to drive a high clearance 4-wheel drive vehicle. So we're finding that it's a safety issue, both to the renters and to those who are rescuing them. And then also it's kind of the owners are reaping the monetary benefits, but the burden is kind of shifted to the residents, you know, to help out fellow humans. So anyway, we believe that this is going to continue as more short-term rentals are being brought onto the market. So our question is, where can we register these incidents to kind of bring light to this issue? Is there a website you want to see document? And then secondly, is this the correct commission to bring it to? Do you have the authority to help us regulate whether it's, you know, the owners must post warnings to the residents on their websites and in the house? You know, what's the responsibility for the owner? So that in summation is.
Well, I'm not expert here, but I believe this is not the right place for that.
Okay, good, all right.
Perhaps Mr. Rich can steer us in the correct direction, however.
Try. So, what we have is zoning authority. So
Okay.
we can zone things, meaning we can regulate what happens on people's properties to a certain effect. So I know short-term rentals, there's a, you know, well, they're not being regulated like a hospital, you know, health wise, kitchen wise or whatever. We can't do anything about that. Taxes are done by the state. We can't do anything about taxes. Things that we could regulate when it comes to short-term rentals is you can regulate how many are in an area. You can require a 500 foot, you know, you don't only have one per 500 feet, or something like that. You know, if things are going on roads, especially like in Centennial area, if like they're in North Fork or those areas or whatever. Those are privately maintained roads and we don't really have regulations on those. I mean, but that type of stuff, well, it's hard because they're private roads, private entities maintain those and regulate those really. So that would be hard to regulate. I don't think we can require, you know, information to be put on websites. I don't think that's something that we should do. Our zoning authority is limited really to what is being happening on their property. I know that other communities license them in some ways. I mean, there's some things that we could look into, but we can't do that right now. If there's complaints right now, because someone is doing a short-term rental, we have no regulations. I mean, we treat short-term rentals the same as like a month-to-month rental or a yearly rental. I mean, they're all the same in the eyes of the county right now.
Yeah, and the only difference is just the roads. What they do in the house doesn't, we don't, you know, it's their, you know, whatever, but it's just the impact on the roads. So if I understood.
Do you have a road district or whatever?
Yeah, but
I mean,
again, you know, not all roads are plowed. But yet someone who's on a road that's not being plowed can rent it out
Okay.
and leave someone kind of stranded there based on the weather. And then, you know, as it's up to us to kind of help that person.
Yes.
So it's looking for any kind of guidance.
Right. I mean, like I said, I think there's some things that we could do and we could look into. I mean, short-term rentals came before this board multiple times, not these members, but
A little bit.
yeah, Joe's looked into it. I think one of my other planners has looked into it in the past. But nothing's really went very far. But we can definitely look into some things. You weren't the one I talked to on the phone the other day, or no, actually it might have been someone that came to our office, but there are others that have similar complaints. And they may show up at this meeting to discuss this. So anything zoning wise, this is the right place to talk about.
Okay, but that wouldn't affect the roads again. I mean, that's the issue. Unless you did kind of mention density, maybe.
Well, I mean, we could, so, you know, when we do have, you know, other projects, we do require parking, and that parking be on site and not on,
right,
you know, in easements and things like that. So that may be something that we could regulate. We just don't at this time. So things that are going on right now, we'd have a hard time doing any type of regulation.
okay. Is there anything we can do, information we can bring forward to help?
You know, really just, you know, any information about what's going on. Any of the things that the problems you're seeing. If we had a list of the problems, we could go through that list and determine if those things we can regulate, and we can determine if we want to regulate them. So
There's the online commenting ability. You know, that's on the website. You can send messages directly to the Board of Commissioners. You could send messages directly to our body, just saying, you know, making I don't know, squeaky wheel gets the grease sometimes. You know, if people are more aware that it's a significant problem to the residents there, then maybe there gets to be momentum for looking at short-term rental regulations. And figuring out what we could do or not do. Just the short-term rental regulations I'm aware of in other states. And I don't know how they mesh between what they all show up on the planning and zoning web pages of these places, but how they mesh with other things like taxes, like collecting gross receipt taxes, or having to post or having to obtain a short-term rental permit. There must be someone available 24 hours to be contacted for like excessive noise after you know, nuisance noise and whatever you want to complain about, you know, there's someone 24 hours a day you're supposed to be able to contact. And I don't know if that's something that we could bring forth in regs like that, or if that would have to be someplace else, but.
And this is just like, it's more safety. people, you know, so it's a little, you know,
Well, when you're
different maybe
rescuing
from
people,
Laramie.
You do put yourself at risk.
Yeah, and that, you know, you don't really know.
Yeah.
Sure,
it's
yeah.
time and
Yeah.
Doesn't Airbnb have safety regulations?
I'm sorry?
Doesn't Airbnb have safety?
Yeah, I know, but
regulations?
like, they could, how would that differ from a regulation in the city of Laramie versus Centennial in the
I
winter?
mean, Airbnb
you know.
itself should have safety regulations on things that are listed on their site.
I guess so, yeah, maybe,
But
if
I
they
don't-
take into
Never
consideration
done it.
Yeah, but there's.
more remote areas.
Companies and Airbnb and they vary in that. So the community company available.
People that don't have access should be complaining and giving low ratings and maybe that.
Right, yeah, over time, yeah.
I can say just anecdotally, talking with other planners, and, you know, looking at other jurisdictions, it is extremely hard to enforce. Legally, so there's that issue, but, I don't know.
Yeah, okay, well, we'll start collecting incidents, details of incidents and just try to, you know, bring it to light. And, you know, hopefully we can come up with something. All right, well, thank you, everyone.
And yes, I will be leaving. Thank you.
There is a really expected on the table. Yes, I think I think about it. They're both gonna be able
We on table.
to, so a second. I wasn't there, second.
I
All opposed? Carries. We will move on to item 9.
Item 9 was one that all three of us agreed to leave the language as is.
Right. Item 10.
Item 10 was another one that we all agreed to leave as is.
Item 11.
That was another one we agreed to leave as is.
Item 12.
Do you have questions about any of these that were going by or? Item 12, there was agreement on leaving the text as is.
13.
That was another leave text as is.
Can I ask a question about what is the name of city and county wanted this opinion?
That's in number 13.
Yeah. I just don't understand what it means.
So I think I can explain what this means.
Okay.
So the approach that was taken was to determine, with the data that was available for existing wells, to determine the depths of the Satinka shell. And we know that 75 feet of Satinka shell is kind of that magic number. So they plotted out all of those. They redrew the line using those wells. And then what they did was they went out to the next property line, section line, quarter section line, you know, the closest legal boundary that you can go out and survey. So that we're using the scientific line, but then we're always also using a line that administratively someone can go out on the property. We could do a survey and say, this is exactly where the line is. And so that was the approach that we used. And so that's what's being talked about. That was the city and county agreed to that approach.
Okay. Item 14.
Item 14, there was also agreement between the three colleges. To leave the language as is.
Legal item 15, there is a little bit of a different take between Stantec and Germany.
Chairman Hinckley and I agreed that we should leave the language as is. And I think that when you look in the cap on page 59, it's the section that discusses confining conditions. It's pretty clear about why those limestone layers in the APOZ are not considered continuously confining, because they're fractured and folded and faulted, and their integrity as a confining layer compromised by the tectonic events that mashed them up. And so, you might get a locally confining situation right in one area, but it does not describe the regional ability of that limestone to create a confining layer. And so we disagreed that Stan Tech should do anything we thought it was perfectly clear as it was in, or at least I did in section 3.2.6, and that we need not elaborate.
Any further discussion? Item 16.
So was that a no on that one?
That's right, we'll leave it as this.
Okay, so item 16 is the septic system impact analysis. And
Yeah, so that's the one, that, 19 was the septic system. And we were putting over, concern was that because they drilled diagonally actually into the septic, that and then they didn't treat the instrument properly without, they didn't
Yeah, they actually broke one of the.
yeah, they broke the seals and anyway.
Did that ever actually happen?
I was there. Yeah,
It was.
Yeah.
it
I
happened.
happened to be on site. They did it. I was like, that's not good. So it's what they did is they drilled down
Mhm.
into it. They didn't just pull their stuff out. They refilled it with bentonite or whatever and pulled the drill bit out or whatever.
Yeah.
Is that, and that should seal it. That supposedly seals that drill hole or whatever in there. So,
Except they said they didn't hydrate it.
No.
yeah, I don't
So
know.
that was- that one.
Yeah, I don't know what they did. If that's what it says in the report, yeah,
Well, that's what the review said.
okay.
I don't, but I don't. know what happened.
the depth of the depth of that angle boring at that point, I think was 15 feet, on the angle. And so depth wise, that's like 11 to 12 feet vertically deep, which given the locations of all these other lysimeters, both also consider that it's across a spatial distance of 75 feet. So you have your puncture of the system that they repaired the next day. And they backfilled the hole. And now you've got your next angle drill point, I'm going to guess about 25 feet down the infiltrator line. And then you have another set, another 25 feet, and then another set all the way at the end of the 75 feet. I just don't think it's a high likelihood that 11-foot breach, even if you're worried about it being a preferential pathway, I don't think that preferential pathway was going to impact something 25 feet away at a different depth. I feel like what they sampled in the lysimeters is representative of what was infiltrating down beneath the infiltrators through the unsaturated zone and getting, sucked into the lysimeters. And even the angle borings of these other ones, where I think they also said they didn't hydrate it that night, that if that was any kind of pathway for fluids to migrate, it would have been for the rainwater and precipitation to come in. And then that just would have diluted the sample that the lysimeter caught. It would actually lead to a lower number of nitrate as nitrogen, not a higher one. So I didn't think that the concerns about the boreholes and how they were completed would have a significant impact on the samples that they collected.
I thought, what I understood them to be saying is that the effluent from the leach field went straight down that floor.
Well, if this, like, say this row of tables is our infiltrator, that the wastewater is, going down, following gravity, going out perforations. You wouldn't expect that in your angle. Your angle boring is like on the other side of the cement wall where you had to start your angle. To be able to drill at a 45-degree, maybe one was 30 degrees, I can't remember. To go under the infiltrator and not hit it, then the opening to your preferential pathway is out of the wastewater pathway.
They were talking about the hole that was built by mistake, that it wasn't sealed properly.
But that one only went down 11 feet and 25 feet away
Okay, so
from.
we sampled under that.
Yeah, or in laterally away from it, you know, so. And I just, plus you got, I mean, there's probably a little bit more infiltrate, I mean, I don't know, think about your own leach fields. I see pretty uniform grass growing out on ours, like the stuff makes it down the infiltrator, it doesn't just. Because it's gravity flowing down it, so if there was any special leakage up at the start of the infiltrator. And if it did go down that preferential pathway, it was at the head of the infiltrator. Then it's still, that preferential pathway is only 11 feet deep and far away from the other lysimeters. So I just didn't think that was gonna be a significant input, especially to the lysimeters that are all the way down at the 75 feet away from that, where you're still seeing.
And it was the next day. I mean, it wasn't.
Yeah, no, they fixed it the next day, and the system was dry at the time because the resident, that's what I talked to the residents about. They've been out of the house for 7 days. And so when they punctured it, I don't know, you were there, I think it was a dry infiltrator. I think the liquid that had been sitting in the infiltrator had plenty of time with the percolation rate out there to percolate into the soil already.
It's very sandy out there, just.
Yeah, it just goes.
Yeah.
So yeah, whatever's gonna evapotranspire or get taken up by the grass, and whatever's gonna percolate down left that infiltrator section, you know, probably dry because of 7 days of the people not using any water in the house. So I didn't think there was a problem with this lysimeter study. And it's very similar to ones that you see the USGS conduct. And I thought it was all pretty par for the course.
I have a question. So the bentonite thing, so if you don't wet it, I mean, it's gonna get wet, so doesn't it do the same thing? And won't that preferential path go away after it's?
Right, that
I mean, I don't
gonna infiltrate in, be it precipitation or wastewater, it's gonna hit that bentonite, the bentonite's gonna go, you know, thanks. And it's not gonna keep on going through.
Right, and
it's just gonna.
I would say there's 2 professional geologists that did stamp that plan. It's not just one. So they stand by what they did, so.
The comment we have from Commissioner Hinckley is, as its primary author, the consultant is thoroughly familiar with the link study. And has opportunity to review the general objections voiced by this commenter. Although the cited, this is privacy, cited peer review is only first offered on 4/26/23. The consultant has used the results of the study appropriately. And
Well, then I had another question about one of their comments, was that, the sampling was done at some depth that was not near where the aquifer actually is, not the bottom of the base.
Right, no, they didn't place
So
their
that's
lysimeters all the way down to, the aquifer.
So the point was that you're not really know what's getting to the aquifer because you're not going that deep.
I can answer the question.
Okay.
So they were in the Casper formation. However, there was not water in the Casper. The water, yeah. So the one thing that I would say that wasn't determined in this, there wasn't a well that was down to the water table. So nothing in this study determined what happens when it gets into the water table. So that was the one thing we didn't have is an extra well, like a monitoring well to see. But was it in the Casper formation? Yes, it was in the Casper formation. There's just no water in the Casper formation where it was.
And what we have are neighboring, we have data from neighboring private wells that show nitrate contamination. So I mean, even though they didn't do a lysimeter every 10 feet all the way down to the saturated zone. I think the fact that there's a big body of data with contaminated private wells that would indicate that, yeah, it makes it down there, it gets there.
Right. And I'll just add, like, the point of this study is, I think it's 4 feet below the whatever the drain field. That's the Vados zone, I guess. I'm not a geologist, but that's where, after that, there's no more treatment. The nitrates are gonna be what they're gonna be. And so that's why they drilled the different things, just to see what happens in that zone. That was the point of the study.
Okay, that wasn't clear.
Yeah.
You get to a certain depth where you're not getting any more evapotranspiration, you're not getting any plant life pulling it out. And you're not in
No oxygen.
you're not in an aerobic environment anymore where you can transform the nitrate into nitrogen gas and have it, disappear.
Okay,
So,
I did not understand that.
yeah, no, they didn't spell that out in the study.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay.
Thank you, that
That-
clarified a lot of my
Yeah, it did.
questions,
That's why.
and that's what I was hoping that Dr. Miller would.
We'll see what he comes back to you with.
I'll see. He was very excited to help, so.
17 is another one of these comments of,
Yeah.
don't use the Wink study, but I think Stantec and Hinckley and myself all felt it was a well-done study, in that, if anything, it might have underestimated the potential loading in the model estimates. So we all thought the report was useful and shouldn't be thrown out for consideration. Okay. 18 is just like number 8.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's the, yeah.
And so I guess if you carry over the decision from 8, then that takes care of 18 as well. 19. Well,
Commissioner Henning, question, do you know how many total wells were actually sampled?
yeah, I can tell you.
I mean, not how many they gave us the data for, but.
All together?
Hmm.
I heard the number 50 quoted from what was verbally told to previous planning and zoning commissions. When verbal reporting of the sampling event was being represented to the commission. I don't know if 50 is that your recollection or?
That was one thing I didn't get to look at, because there was a PowerPoint that was done. Might be able to look that up, but I don't know. So I'll go with what you're saying. It's close enough.
It's
50, give or take 50.
But more than the, how many was this that you were given 12? I guess we had 18 wells, if I'm counting right, without my glasses on.
Thank you.
On item 19, there was a difference of opinion between Mr. Hinckley and the consultant.
Yeah, the consultant agreed that we didn't need that in the SSI, but I see the inventory being important for like the non-conforming uses that may be doing a prohibited activity. We would want to know what their quantities and types of chemicals might be. And also just thinking about things like non-prohibited things, like maybe you want to do jewelry making in your outbuilding, and you're gonna wash stuff down the drain that you might want to know what somebody has. So we didn't think it was government overreach to want to know what people had. In both the case of a non-conforming use and in a conforming use that still uses potentially harmful chemicals. So we thought it should be just retained and left as is, and we can clarify how to hone in on that more in the regulation phase, like that would be appropriate to kick down the road in the regulations to see if it still is what we want to do.
You mean the table?
Yeah, the last bullet of the
Yeah.
SSI.
Okay.
And I agree with that.
Okay, so
So we're gonna leave it in.
we'll leave it as is then.
Yeah.
Okay, so then 20 is another one where we all agreed to keep it as is. I think, right? Oh, no,
No, it
the
says
third
amend.
paragraph of 20. I think there was agreement to omit the WDEQ standard because it's not part of our regs yet.
Right, and there's a specific recommendation there, which I will read. And this is on page 150 of the new version. I believe in paragraph 3. And it's to leave the sentence in 6.3.2.5, design standards. Well, under that's the heading, beginning with, in the design standards for on-site wastewater, the sentence goes on, and ending with public water supply. This is the next last sentence in the paragraph. On page 150.
And that's what's being recommended by the Starkeys on this.
This-
Go omit that section, that's
and,
third paragraph.
Mr. Hinckley concurred.
So, okay. Is everybody okay with omitting that?
Yeah.
I mean, because it's basically referring to something that's not in our regulations. It is in statute, but not necessarily in this form, so. But, okay,
Yep,
Sharon,
Yes,
just to be clear, it's that third paragraph in 20 would be deleted.
yes. Although it comes down to a single sentence in the actual, the plan.
the rest of 20, no, is that right?
The rest of 20, we felt the word.
Right, it's just that one.
Okay.
Just that.
It's just. No.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
since we've had a motion on every other sort of disposition of these, could we get a motion for that one too?
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Trying to find the actual page.
For 2151.
What I would say is just, omit the third paragraph, recommended in number 20 of the Starkey letter comments. That would make it easier because everything else we're doing is on this
Right.
comments and not necessarily
At
going
that
to the
time, on item number 28, I moved that we delete the third paragraph. And then the starting comments. Is there a second? Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. All opposed? It passes.
21, we were in agreement on keeping the language as it is. 22, we had a little different of opinions, let's see. I think we just. Stantec wanted to clarify that the location of the current part of the monitoring network is appropriate for keeping an eye on the Turner well field. I personally wouldn't mind seeing a monitoring well be out in that subdivision area, but I feel like that's can be commented on at the time that a monitoring network plan is proposed, so I can live with Stantec's clarification. And we can just let Stantec clarify as they see fit. Otherwise, see, lots of confusion. And
We haven't.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
Commissioner Member Hanning, at this point, we have not made any direction to Stantec. So I suppose, just because there is a clock running on that contract, and it could be, sounds like there may be some extenuating circumstances that may prevent a rapid turnaround, if we direct them to some sort of wordsmithing, so
I think we can.
it might be prudent to accomplish it all in-house at this
Right.
point.
Okay, then,
Yes,
we can, I think it's fine to leave the wording as is, because the actual monitoring plan, the actual network, I think is yet to be specifically defined, and this is like a conceptual idea of where to put wells.
Right.
So,
So is there a way we can,
Or the wells are. There, I think there is an Imperial Heights well, a Triangle well, LCCC well, and Turner. I think those are, what Mark's saying is those exist. So we really don't, I mean, he's saying, well, we could clarify this, but is it needed?
it seems like it's not needed, so if we can leave it as is, then. If that's okay with you guys.
Yeah.
23. 23, it seems like it is appropriate to amend. As suggested in the first paragraph of 23, or as Stantec acknowledges that you could take out the reference to zone 1. Because septic systems aren't going to be completed in zone 1. But that would be the only change to make there.
so basically saying to take, just say zone 2
Yes.
Yeah.
instead of zone
Yes.
1 and 2?
Right, because the zone 1 is just immediately around the
The well.
public supply
Yeah.
lines. No one can put a septic tank there anyway.
Do we need a motion for that?
Please.
I make a motion that the number 1 and the word all on page 160 we deleted.
My second. Is there any further discussion?
Number 1, is that what you said?
Zone 1, so the
So-
number 1 and all of the word.
As per Starkey comment 23, paragraph 1.
Oh, I see, okay, yes.
Is there any further discussion? In that case, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
24, we were in agreement with retaining the text as is. 25, we were in agreement to keep the text as is. 26. Also keep the text as is. 27, also to keep retain the text as is. And let's see, 28. We have there. Well, so we had some differing opinions on that. I know Stantec said you could take out the failing and just keep it to the fail. But I was a proponent of keeping it as is. And because I think that universe of what's failing and what has failed is a pretty broad universe that we actually haven't defined, but could be defined in regulations. So I'd be a proponent for just leaving it the way it is and then nitpicking over how to deal with it when it comes to regulations.
You mean in a regulation define what failing is and
Or what versions of failing would trigger needing to replace your system. Like in my mind, a system that is actively contaminating groundwater has failed. And one that is approaching the MCL of 10 is failing. You know, like it's getting close to being a failure. But I don't know if everyone would agree with my definition, and that could be where you hash that out in the regulation phase as to, you know, if there's just a baffle broken in my septic tank, can I fix it? It's a failed thing, but it should be okay to just like repair your baffle and your septic tank. So I think to me, it just comes down to how you deal with that in the regulations, and I was fine with the more broad language of failed or failing to keep it.
So my question is, who determines if your septic system has failed or is failing?
I think that's what we gotta figure out in the regulations.
I mean, are we gonna have a schedule of something else, or are we gonna have someone run tests or?
Well, if that's proposed in the cap, it doesn't sound like it's realistic at this point in county staffing to implement that in the cap. You know, like that may be a part of the cap that doesn't turn into regulations in the immediate future. But it should stay a part of the cap because that would be like a good thing if there was an inspection program. But say you've already gone through one leach field and it's outlived its life expectancy and it's failing and you have surfacing wastewater in your yard. And now you're gonna go over to your replacement leach field and use that for as long as you can. And now say your second replacement leach field is now failing and you got surfacing wastewater in your yard. Do you then have to go to advanced treatment or do you get to have a third replacement leach field? You know, these are the things I think we got to figure out in the regulations, but like and figure out what are the triggers that should merit just to fix your problem and what merits requiring advanced treatment.
Because right now, don't we have those of us who bother to come out of septic? The guy who does it, you know, says your septic is fine.
Yeah.
We get a report from the guy who pumps it.
Yes, we do. Yeah, so the difference is whether that's just between you and the contractor you hired to pump out your system versus that contractor notifying the county that your system has a cracked tank or a broken baffle or you know, whatever it may be.
I doubt they'll agree to do that. I don't kill their business.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of just had a conversation, like, we don't really define what failed means or failing in our regulations. I mean, I know we use the terminology failed in our regulations currently. I mean, it may be a good idea just to keep both of those open and it's general. So when we get to the, regulations, we can define those a little bit better,
That's where I was being a proponent for, is just keep the language as is.
Right.
And we'll sort it out in the regulations as.
Right.
What,
Yeah, does failing mean like the leach field? Does that mean there's a pipe? I mean, yeah,
there's a lot of.
right. There's a lot of different ways to look at that. Yeah, so.
Well, I believe we can keep that as it is also.
Okay,
For the time being.
so that's 28 then.
Yes.
29, we were in agreement on keeping as is. 30. I guess we agree that the Hinckley memorandum should be somehow in the public record. I don't know when it's referenced in the cap. Where does it reside as a public document?
We could add that to the minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That works.
If you would like to do that, maybe make a motion to add that to the minutes.
Okay.
And I'll just say that.
I'm sorry, I missed this. What?
And so it's the Hinckley Consulting did a study of the I-80 corridor.
Right.
And although he put that in, I think, to a board of commissioners meeting into their packet, so it's somewhere it is in the public. And I think he also took it to the city council. So I think it's in the public sphere. But maybe other people aren't aware that it's out there. And wouldn't want to have to go back into 2 years ago minutes to try to find it. So,
So if we put the minutes, that will take care of that. for
Yeah.
Sure.
Gotcha.
Do we need a motion for that, Matt? I don't think we do.
We'll just put it in the minutes and get the public record.
Okay, so that takes care of 30. 31, we all agreed on keeping the language as is. 32. I guess we have to discuss, and Mr. Tady's still here, so he might have an opinion about this one. So there is a conflict between how city sewer and water lines are rated as whether it's a high priority risk or a low priority risk. And they're different in different places, and so we have to decide what they are. And Stantec agreed with the high priority rating, but I tend to think that the city's actually done quite a bit to replace their lines over time, and that they're not as high risk as they might have been in the past, and I put them at low risk, but we have to somehow bring the two places where they show up, one place is high, one place is low, and we have to bring it into parity. And I don't feel strongly about it, but I felt strongly enough to feel like they shouldn't be considered in the same light as the many septic systems out there that are high priority. But you can convince me otherwise, or like I said, I don't, it's not a hill I need to die on.
We've actually discussed this. We think Lowe's, or at least there. Is that what's in there now?
I think in one place it's low, in another place it's high.
Okay.
That's
Chair commission, yeah, it's listed two different ways in the report, and we believe it should be low. We don't believe sewer lines are a major risk to the aquifer. And we do not agree with the statement made that the city, I can't remember what it says, given the poor record of water and sewer line maintenance by the city of Laramie, high priority is more appropriate. That's an incorrect statement. It's a false statement.
So I'll make a motion there, and this refers to the prior version of the technical implementation numbers. Nevertheless, my motion is that I move that we change in appendix C, page 95/230 of PDF, sewer lines recognized high priority to low priority. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Is there any further discussion? That is, we'll vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the motion carries.
So 33 was another error that we agreed needed to be updated accordingly.
Staples is now LEAP.
Right.
We can
Right.
change that out.
Totally different activities.
Yes.
I believe it. 30
Much.
34.
It's like there's an opinion there between.
Oh.
Technically. Yeah. For 33. Sorry.
To change Staples to LEAP.
Oh,
I moved to change Staples to LEAP in appendix E, page 103.
I'll second that.
230 of the PDF.
is there any discussion? In that case, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
So 34. Well, was there a conflict still on this one, or I thought we all agreed to leave the language as it is on 34?
There was no conflict, which we're in.
Yeah, so 34, we felt should stay as is. Comment 35 was already addressed at our last, meeting on the 26th. I think that was one of the appendix
Right.
pieces that we made. 36, I think we all agreed to keep as is. And 37, we agreed to keep as is.
I agree with that.
Did we make explicit motions on these other? Like editing changes? Were we doing that all the way through? Like,
Well, I think is what we'll need to do, just to cover it all, is now make a motion to
Right.
accept all of the amendments and edits that we've discussed and agreed upon tonight. And then, if you would like to certify it, you can certify that. Yes.
Okay, yeah, and I mean, if there's any sort of consideration, that would like to be attached to that motion for adopting the amendments, considering the various responses to Mrs. Starkey's comments and our discussion here this evening.
Add something to your motion, that's what he's saying.
Right, yeah.
Well, it's, well, we don't have Mr. Mr. Gersh providing us with the statute. We have to provide factual.
So that'd be, I move to direct staff to compile all comments received by the Planning and Zoning Commission on the Casper Aquifer Protection Plan and proposed regulations for further consideration. Oh, wait, am I doing the wrong motion here?
I believe we need
I
to,
think I need to do the first one first.
yes, first accept all these changes as an amendment. Incorporate all these errata changes.
I move to direct staff to amend the cap update as amended in our meeting tonight.
And that's where you'd like
And as
add some. reasoning.
after duly considering comments from the public and from the Planning and Zoning Commission members
And the discussion here.
and the discussion continued.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any further discussion? In that case, we'll call the vote. Mr. David,
Yes.
Ms. McBride,
Yes.
Sandy,
Yes,
and I vote yes also. Motion passes.
Mr. Chair, if you would like to certify this plan with the amendments that have just been made to the Board of County Commissioners, that would be appropriate. If you would like this to come back at another meeting to look at again, that's also an option. I would prefer the former.
Any further discussion here, commissioners?
Mr. Chair, I move to certify the cap update as amended to the Board of County Commissioners
For their approval.
for their approval.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any further discussion? None, we will conduct another roll call vote. Mr. David,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Sandy,
Yes,
and I vote yes also. Motion carries. Are there any further motions? Themes that we might like to make.
very good. I think we've met the.
Yes, go ahead, please.
So we've made all these changes. We've got our cap kind of figured out what we like. It'll now go to Planning and Zoning Commission or Planning Commission at the city. So they will have to review these and hopefully make a similar recommendation if there are changes. I mean, there's always a possibility that if we're gonna do this plan on the same, have it the same, we may have to bring it back if there are changes. I don't know if that'll happen or not. Chris, just tell us, what are you gonna do? But that, I'm just kind of letting you know.
Can I say something?
Yes, go ahead, please.
I know that this was very lengthy and tiring to go through the comments and discuss many of them at length. But I really appreciate the fact that we did that, and I thank everybody for their patience. Because I think it satisfies our obligation to our constituents to deal with whatever they bring to our attention in good faith.
So overall, that's what we're here for, so.
Yeah.
I think we did the right thing.
I appreciate those of you that went through in such detail.
Detail and know what they're talking
Yeah, that
about.
was-
I couldn't-
That was really helpful.
I know that there was at least one motion that Mr. Hinckley would have liked to have made for a year, and I'll simply read it and see if we want to act on this also. And the language is roughly to direct staff to compile all comments received by the Planning and Zoning Commission on the Capital Protection Plan and proposed regulations for further consideration as part of the development of aquifer protection overlay zone amendments. Same to be included in record to the Board of County Commissioners to accompany certification of proposed amendments. Sort of laying the groundwork for regulation to come. We don't have to act on this, we want to do it, but again, if you want to cover this.
We're supposed to get a red line strikeout from Stan Tech, right, about the regulation changes they think would follow from the path.
We did have one, but I think it was on the former regulations that we were under. We do have all of theirs. If we don't get it from Stantec, I will put together a deadline version.
Well, so is that a formal motion? Because it seems like a good way to keep these moving forward.
I will make this motion. I move to direct staff to compile all comments received by the Planning and Zoning Commission on the Capital Aquifer Protection Plan and propose regulations for further consideration as part of the development of aquifer protection overlay zone amendments. Same to be included in record of the Board of County Commissioners to accompany certification of proposed amendments. Is there a second?
I second.
Further discussion?
Well, we don't need to certify the proposed amendments anymore because we did that tonight.
I believe that this is in reference to regulation coming.
Oh, okay. Well,
In further comments? In that case, we'll vote. Mr. David?
I,
Ms. McCormick?
Yes.
Ms. Hannon?
hi.
I vote aye also. Motion carries. That concludes our business with the capital aquifer plan update. Unless anyone has a further comment. Eric, Chris? Sue? Matt? Okay, in that case, we're done with that. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for June 14th, 5 o'clock. Hopefully back in the commissioner's room, hopefully.
That's the plan.
All right.
So they put some more stuff in there, so pretty soon we'll have chairs.
Any commissioner comments? Okay.
when is the July meeting planned for?
What was that?
When is the date of the July
We
meeting?
don't see you at all.
July meeting? Or one day in July, right? Second one's July 12th.
I don't have them here.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe that would be.
I've been rains and colder. No, there is. Okay.
Are we adjourned?
Not yet. Are there any other comments?
Everybody says in
I don't believe we have any citizens left. So therefore, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I'm asking for a motion.
I
And a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adjourning the meeting? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carried, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
We can touch.